We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Special day today, episode 702. We're going to be drawing the name of our Patreon winner of a spaceship model made by Andrew.
Not yet.
But it's not happening yet. We're teasing it out.
Very end.
It's not going to be the very end, is it?
It's not going to be the very end, no. We're going to talk about other stuff first, though. We got to get all the stuff out of the way and all the other stuff. But did you test out the Xbox?
No.
Audio change?
You know what? This week, I literally didn't watch anything on my television.
Is your cable broken?
No. I was very busy. We my apartment building. We ended up having to do an inspection because somebody, an unknown apartment number, had apparently an infestation of whatever bugs or whatever. So there was a lot of prepping my apartment because I haven't done anything to organize or clean my apartment in months. So there was a whole lot of that, me doing that, which meant things were being moved around and disconnected and no time to watch anything. So no, I didn't test the audio. Did you?
I did. I did, and I could not verify definitively that anything was coming out of the Atmos speakers.
Okay.
The overheads, but I can definitively say that all 7 floor-level speakers were making noise on content that would never have had that, Netflix or something like that. So yes, so now I'm off of the Roku and back onto the Xbox because it has the better audio suddenly.
Okay,
who knew?
Yeah. So in case people aren't familiar with what we're talking about, this is after the latest update, you get the Dolby Access app, which isn't there by default. So if you didn't have it before, you do need to download it. And then you can go into the settings of the Dolby Access app and activate upmixing for Dolby Atmos. So now the upmixing, Dolby Surround upmixing, is taking place inside of the Xbox One console. So the front of your AV receiver will always say Atmos on it, which it did before. If you set the bitstream output option to Atmos, it said it before. But now it's actually upmixing inside the Xbox One, at least to 7.1, if nothing else, if not the overheads.
I cannot verify the overheads. I tried one time, and I couldn't hear anything coming from them, but who knows what that means. We were just watching the end of Doctor Strange, the beginning of Black Panther before this, and I should have stood up to see, stood on the side of my couch.
Put your ear right up next to a Prime Elevation speaker.
Yeah, I could have, but I didn't. So
I didn't test it. Maybe I will
working
at some point. Who knows?
Maybe. Don't worry about it. I will. This you could leave this one to me, right?
All right.
I will do it. All right, let's, first of all, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Mm-hmm. You can go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. If you want to get your question onto the podcast definitively, for sure, 100%, send it to question@avrant.com.
Yes, please.
Everything else may or may not happen.
Taking your chances. Email us if you want to be on the podcast.
That's right. Yeah. And if you don't email us, then you're also taking your chances that we may or may not answer you.
That's right.
Because, you ask us a real long question on Twitter, and you're going to get, send it to the email, because we're not going to answer it on there. We want to thank our listeners of the week. I finished that? No. You contact Rob directly. Rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. Mm-hmm. Listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, to support the podcast in some way, the way you support the podcast is you can go to avrant.com, click on the buy us a cup of coffee link, and leave us a PayPal donation there. Take you to PayPal. You can use your account, or you can use a credit card, anonymously-ish. I mean, I don't know how it works. But, and you can do it that way. Or you can go to patreon.com. Oh, wait. So we had 2 listeners this week that gave us a PayPal donation.
Right.
We want to thank Matthew, or Matt, I'm not sure which one, and Kevin, or Kev, I'm not sure which one. So thank you, Matthew and Kevin.
Matthew and Kevin, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. We appreciate it.
Yeah. You You also go to patreon.com. Patreon is a service that is a monthly subscription to your content creators of choice. It's a minimum of $1 a month, a maximum of infinity dollars. So we had a whole bunch. We have 120 patrons right now, including a couple of people who just to let us know that they signed up, Max and Michael and Kevin and Mark and Stan. So Michael also sent us a thank you note saying he found Rob's LG OLED settings very helpful, especially the Dolby Vision section. So you're welcome, Michael. But thank you to all of our 120 patrons, and we're going to thank one of you extra in just a second when we choose your name to get a model from our listener, Andrew, right?
Andrew?
Was that right?
That's
Andrew.
the fellow. Yeah. So I'll mention again, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up for a automatic monthly donation, a voluntary subscription. And Max, Michael, Kevin, Mark, and Stan, thank you very much for being amongst our 120 patrons at the moment. Michael, very glad that those settings were helpful to you. That's nice to hear.
All right. Let's. If you can't support us financially, we completely understand, especially in these particular times. So if you do have a way of supporting us, let us know what you did, and we will mention you on the podcast. So Stan let us send Acoustics know that his Sierra 2 EX purchase was thanks to us. He says Rob's comments and review about the Sierra 2 speakers convinced him to give them a go, and his listening experience lines up with what Rob said about Ascend speakers. So he's very happy with the purchase. So
that is great to hear, Stan. Congrats on the purchase there, and thanks for giving us a shout out to Ascend.
And Joseph told Accessories for Less they learned about their site from us when he bought a refurbished Denon X4500H. They actually offered him a brand new X4500H at a reduced price after he dropped our name. Coincidence?
I honestly have no idea. I don't really think it had anything to do with mentioning AVRant, but Joseph, we're very glad that you did. We appreciate that, and congrats on your purchase. He still went for the refurbished one because it was still less expensive and came with like an extended warranty on it anyway, so he felt pretty confident purchasing the refurbished one, and congrats on that.
All right, we also have some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, even though Rob is out there working with the contaminated public.
Oh, am I ever? It is only increasing the number of people with whom I am forced to come in contact with. Yes.
So they started like relaxing things around here, and the stores are full of children with no masks on. I mean, their parents normally don't have any masks on, but I really find it irksome when I see a parent with a mask on and a bunch of kids with no masks on. I'm like, so you love them, but they don't love you? Is that how that works? A little confused as to what message you're trying to send. You're like, go ahead, cough on my kids. I got lots. So we got some notes of gratitude from Karl, Kevin, another Kevin, so two Kevins, Sean, who has been listening since the Dina days and has enjoyed the podcast evolution with Liz and then Liz and Rob and now our Q&A format, as well as Ben. So thank you, Karl, Kevin, Sean, and Ben.
Indeed, Karl, Kevin, the other Kevin, Sean, and Ben. Thank you very much. It's really nice to receive those messages. It's encouraging, and I appreciate it very much.
Right. We're also going to thank Andrew in just a second for what he's about to do, which is to give away a model of your choice, kind of.
Whatever he offers, whatever Andrew says is available, which
it may be a list.
Might be one or two.
A list of one. You can have a TIE Fighter or a TIE Fighter.
Well,
how do you feel about a TIE Fighter?
You got a Romulan Warbird. Right,
I did,
and I got a TIE Fighter. I definitely got a TIE Fighter.
The last guy got an X-wing.
Our last winner got an X-wing. So you'll get something very cool.
I think I got the best one, but all right. So we've got 120 patrons to choose from. So Rob's going to generate a number. I have sorted them from the time that they started becoming patrons.
Okay.
Chronologically, so earliest now. That being said, I still see on here that some people have been patrons since like a long time ago, but then they only the last couple of months have they actually donated. I don't know how that could possibly work, but somehow it does. I don't know what how it works, but yes, this is not based on how much money you've ever given.
Absolutely not.
Just a number. So I will have to count because there's no number next to your name. And each one shows 50 people.
Let's hope
I got 120. So I I got it. If you let's hope it's not somewhere in the middle of a group of 50.
right.
It will take me a second to get
Drum
there.
roll, please.
Drum roll, please. Rob's using random.org
Here we go.
to get the
President.
number.
Okay, well, it's not the worst ever. You can count from the end. It's number 89.
89. Okay, so I can go to the second page
And
here.
you go back 21. That should work.
No, I go back 89.
Oh,
I go back 11.
89. No, wait. That would only get you to 100. 31. You got to go back 31. We got 120, right?
No,
you only went up to 100.
Each page is 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 89, I got to go back
You
to
can see how
11.
well we planned this, folks.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
All right.
Oh, who was the last winner?
I'm forgetting now.
Was it Turn Toast?
It was. It was definitely.
It's him again.
Wait, we can't do that.
We can't
do that.
I'm sorry, Turn Toast. You're not getting two.
That would be.
Give me another
that'd
number.
be great. Okay. What are the chances of that? Well, I guess 1 in 120.
1 in 120. Exactly.
Okay, hold on.
All right, everybody. You heard it here first. That was your first bullet dodged. You thought you lost, but you were going again. Rob, generate me another number.
Okay, it's 26. I really wasn't expecting that at all.
Oh man, it's right in the middle. Jeez,
26 isn't right. Well, it's right in the middle of the first.
It's
page.
right in the middle of a group of 50.
Okay,
Yes,
well,
it is. I have to count up 26. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
This is the worst conducted draw ever.
20. It's Turn Toast again.
No,
I'm
yeah,
looking.
right, yeah.
His name is Scott M.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how to identify him, but his name is Scott M. So if your name is Scott and your last initial is M, there's a very good chance that you are in a very short list of people who could be one of our winners. So Scott M, we will be contacting you very soon.
Yep.
I see his email address is different than what his name is. I mean, it looks like a completely different
name. That should be fine. That shouldn't be a problem.
So we will email you right after, or maybe during this podcast, if I get a second.
Once we hear back from this Scott M.
Oh wait, no, that wasn't Scott. Oh yeah, this is Scott M. Okay, yeah. So his email address actually matches.
Okay, so once we hear back from Scott M, then we'll get Scott in touch with Andrew, and that you two will sort out the thing.
That's right. God, I can't believe Turn Toast won twice.
That is
Dude.
insane. That is truly insane. It wasn't even on my mind that was possible. I mean, I guess it should have been, but I truly did not even consider it. I lost it, man. That is hilarious. Well, I think last time
if I hadn't reorganized the letter, because the list naturally comes in alphabetical,
and that's how we did it last time.
And that's how we did it last time. The man's lucky.
No kidding.
Just a lucky
At least
man.
with us. That's nuts. We're sorry, man. We can't have you in twice. That's just not fair. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Try and.
All right. Well, that was very exciting. I kind of feel like we should give him something too. I don't know. He wants.
You got a tie. You got a X-wing. That's pretty awesome already.
That's what you got. All right.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Here we go. Let's go on to the news here. Let's get back to serious podcast time.
That's right, as we always are. Super serious around here at AVRant.
Super serious. We're the super seriousness. Speaking of bugs, guess what happens when you have an open pipe in your house for like
it's not
months
still
and
open, is it? It must be closed.
Oh, it's gone. It's all closed up now. But like the one that was cracked and open, it was allowing bugs to like live behind my kitchen.
I would imagine.
And I had the fumigation lady come over today. Super nice. I love her. She's so great. She came in and we were talking about it. And she's like, "Oh, I'll just spray, and then but when you get everything closed up, right before you get everything closed up, call me back and I'll come back." And she's like, "Well, I'm going to go back into where this big hole is, where I can get behind your kitchen where the plumbers were working, and I'll put some stuff back there, and that'll kill everything, and you'll be fine." And I heard her back there start screaming, "Oh my God, they're crawling all over me!" I was like, "Oh Jesus!" And she came back and she goes, Yeah, I'm coming back next week, and I may be coming back every week from now for a little while.
Okay.
She goes, I was not prepared for that, but I am going to Instagram it. Would you like me to tag you? I'm like, no, do not tag me in the roaches pic. The thing that made the fumigation lady get like excited. Ooh, I've never seen this many. Wait. So, yeah. Not my fault.
The professional fumigator's amount of poison is insufficient.
Well, she's only allowed to, when there's people inside the house, she's only allowed to spray a certain amount. She's like, I could kill everything, but you'd have to move out for a couple of days. I'm like, okay, just come back next week. All right, in the news here. Ugh.
Yup.
They're so gross. It's so gross. In the news, according to Vincent Teo from the HDTV test, Dolby determined that the Changhong, I'm not saying this stupid thing, the ultra short throw projector that was supposed to be Dolby Vision are inadequate to meet their standards for Dolby Vision, so it has been removed from those models via a firmware update.
Yup.
Wow.
Which kind of makes me think that maybe it wasn't like fully authorized before they put it out there, that they maybe just got a hold of the code and threw it into their projector, because once Dolby actually tested it, which was in all other instances has taken place before the product is released to the public. But yes, they're like, this is not adequate to live up to what we consider Dolby Vision standards. And so there is no longer a consumer projector available from anyone with Dolby Vision on it, at least not officially.
It's not very shocking there, I gotta be honest with you.
I wasn't totally expecting that, though. A retraction of the first ever Dolby Vision projector.
I doubt they clearly didn't get it authorized beforehand, and regardless of, I mean, it could be like the world's best Dolby Vision projector that's ever going to be, much less ever a banned, since it's the first one. It could be but they'd still take it away.
Could be.
I mean, of course they would.
Yep.
Because it's illegal what they did. All right, so do you remember Dolby Atmos music? No, because no one does. It never really existed. But okay, remember how up until now the only way to hear it was via Amazon Music and the Amazon Echo Studio smart speaker? No, because nobody does that. Well, you can finally listen to Dolby Atmos music using an an AV receiver and a full speaker system, or an Atmos soundbar, or even via the TV that decodes Atmos internally, if you're so inclined. Tidal Dolby Music. Tidal Dolby Atmos music now works on Apple TV 4K, Amazon Fire TV devices, the models that support Atmos, and Android TV, although for the NVIDIA Shield, it only works on the newest models that came out in 2019. Does that mean it works on the Xbox? Because is that Android, and that's not Android?
No, that is not Android. That's
right,
Windows
that's
underneath.
Microsoft.
The
of course.
Special version of Windows.
My brain did not work for a second there. You'll need the Tidal Hi-Fi subscription, which is $20 a month. Tidal will default to Atmos if the track you're listening to isn't available in Atmos, and you're using Atmos-capable hardware. I will say that I don't know what the Tidal app is like, but I downloaded the TED Talk app on the Xbox One.
That is very different.
It is, I know, but I've never really had a problem with any apps on the Xbox One until I downloaded the TED Talk one, and I was like, who created this? Because they need to give a TED Talk on how bad this thing is. I've never had something crash so many times. So, but it was on the Windows machine, so we can do.
Well,
but okay.
Regardless, I'm interested to see this. I won't be paying $20 a month to try it out, and I don't believe that the 7-day free trial that Tidal offers is the full hi-fi version, because they have a tiered subscription model of various prices, and I believe the free version is not the highest version as far as the trial goes. So I probably won't be doing this, although I do have hardware, especially the Apple TV 4K, and I have one of the newest 2019 NVIDIA Shields, but I also don't know what the availability is in Canada, if that's any different than the US. But anyway, some folks were asking about this previous. They're like, I'd like to give this a try, but it seems like the only piece of hardware I can use to actually play this is Amazon's Echo Studio smart speaker, and that doesn't really seem like a full fat Atmos setup. So now there's a way via Tidal. That's cool.
That is a thing that exists that I will never, ever experience.
I don't know what Tidal's Atmos Music library is like compared to Amazon's. I know that Amazon was, for a long time, claiming that they had the largest Atmos Music library, and I believe them, but I don't know how large Tidal's is at this point.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. I was doing some things. LG's OLED factory in China is finally up and running after several previous delays. They're producing the new 48-inch size, with the first units expected to be delivered to stores by the end of June. So
that's it. That's good news. Glad that they got that up and functioning. And yeah, the 48-inch size is something quite a few people have been looking forward to. LG themselves are heavily marketing it towards the gamer crowd because their OLEDs actually do all 3 versions of variable refresh rate, or will be able to. So they can do the HDMI 2.1 version of variable refresh rate, they can do G-Sync, and they can do FreeSync. And that's one of the few displays that can. So there you go. 4K 120 hertz as well.
Okay. I just was getting that guy's name into an email before. I have this app thing that closes windows. I had to put on all my computers because my family thinks that closing a tab is akin to killing something, and they're afraid that the angels will not get their wings or something. So I had to get a thing. But I wanted to make sure that we got that name down.
Yes. Some
comments here. Ilango just wanted to say thanks for simplifying his outdoor speaker plans. He will go with Paradigm Rock speakers that we suggested, and he won't worry about an outdoor subwoofer.
All right. Good update. Thank you, Ilango.
Max, wrote back to say thank you for simplifying his plans for his attic theater. We said a door should be his number 1 priority, and his wife agrees. It's like the first time that's ever happened. The wife finally agrees with us. That's awesome. We like your wife. Put her on, man. Stop talking to us. So that's the first on the list. Then he'll add DIY bass trapping behind his couch along the floor, which is unused space anyway, and he hadn't thought of using it, so that was helpful. That was probably me, I think. And finally, he'll add panels to his sloped ceiling, which is almost certainly Rob. In answer to some of our question, his upward-firing Atmos speakers do seem to add some height effects, but it's indistinct and amorphous, which is pretty good description of Atmos in general, honestly. So yeah, so he also has his doubts that the sound is genuinely reflecting, and we commented on the cool-looking lamp on his left wall that was made by his grandpa. So Max appreciated the sentiment. It's still a cool-looking lamp.
Yes.
I like that thing.
Hasn't changed since the last time you saw it.
Well, I know, but I forgot about it, and I looked at it and went, oh my God, it's cool.
It is.
Yes.
Yep.
It looks like you know what it looks like? It looks like if you put a sword on the hilt of Excalibur.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the rock is the tabletop thing. It just goes straight through the middle of it. That's a cool lamp, man. All right, Andrew. So Andrew was a fellow who mentioned that it cost about $12,000 to finish his room using DIY soundproofing construction when Aras was asking about a ballpark figure for his budget. By the way, Aras is the correct pronunciation. Oh, okay. And we have convinced him not to spend thousands on an amp just because it looks pretty. He doesn't want Tom's ghost haunting his theater room, even though that cracked him up. Okay, whatever. Yes, that was the RS was thinking about buying an amp because it was Macintosh and pretty.
That's right. But back to Andrew's comment.
And back to Andrew here. Having gone through the entire process, Andrew wanted to share his advice, which is to resign yourself to losing some floor space and height in order to greatly simplify the actual construction and end up with better results. Just build the framing and cross brace. All of it is Andrew's advice. Again, having gone through it, trying to save inches by worrying about sound clips or other more complicated decoupling methods greatly increases the cost and especially the time involved. Simply putting up decoupled framing is so much cheaper, easier, and faster. And with simple cross bracing and a tight drywall nailing schedule, you get much better rigidity, which Andrew now feels is much more important consideration than is usually mentioned. Insulate everything. It's relatively cheap, so just do it. Don't leave any gaps. Pay the extra for proper solid core door. I am totally doing that. By the way, I actually talked to my wife about that just the other day. Because we were having a contractor come in to do work to fix everything that's the plumbers broke. So I was like, dude, if we get a solid core door here, I can't promise it's going to make a huge difference, but it might.
I think it'll make
a
some.
difference.
I think it will. Make some.
I mean, like, so I agree. So the solid core door. Andrew considers that a must-have now that he's done it, and really pay attention to sealing around every outlet and necessary opening. Make sure you hang your first layer of drywall horizontally, as that allows you to have access to all the places that need to be sealed with putty pads and expanding foam. Speaking of which, while really well-designed and constructed backer boxes for can lights and in-ceiling speakers can definitely work, don't do it unless you absolutely have to. Again, it's the cost and time involved. Surface mounting everything you can saves a ton on both. And when it comes to the floor, a well-secured subfloor of OSB over the dimpled plastic sublitter that Rob has often mentioned is the way to go. So Andrew hopes his experience might help some others to realize the value of simplifying the actual construction. We all start with ideas of maximizing floor space and ceiling height inside the room, but unless time and money are no object, you quickly discover that a few extra inches cost you a lot of both. So there you go.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I really appreciate all of that. We do tend to sometimes get into the details of, sound clips and hat channels or resilient channels, or now some of these new things from like ISO Store, some alternatives to sound clips. But I completely agree. If you have the investment of time to give and you're going to be dedicated to installing everything absolutely correctly, because getting everything like aligned, level, plumb, it's not dead simple. The stuff that you are using for construction is not always perfectly level and plumb when you buy it from the store, and adjusting all of that. So yeah, the time involved is significant. And I think what he says makes a ton of sense, which is like building stick framing fast and cheap. And yeah, it might not save you every available possible conceivable inch, but the time and money well worth it. So yeah, he's gone through it. I really appreciate what he said there.
So Karl wanted to note for me that the Roku Premiere can pass through Dolby Atmos, but the only Roku apps that support right now are Vudu and Amazon Prime Video. Okay, so I must be doing something wrong, because the first thing I did was like I read that Amazon Prime worked.
Okay.
So I went and started watching the first season of
Jack Ryan.
Which
is like the only thing I'm sure actually has Atmos on Amazon
and
Prime.
It wasn't Atmos when it came out. So I went into like all the settings, and nowhere in the settings does it say anything about Atmos. And I make sure to update everything, so I know it's all updated. Yeah. But maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe you have to, while you're in Amazon and while you're watching the thing, you have to go to the settings and whatever.
Well, for all I know, now, Amazon has taken away Atmos from like the one show that had it. I wouldn't put it past them. But the main thing is just that, of course, most people go to Netflix first because it's the most ubiquitous and easiest. But the Roku Netflix app doesn't do Atmos, so
right. All right, Alvin. This is the first question for tonight. Alvin was using Handbrake to back up his DVDs. We've talked about making MKV several times, so he decided to try it out by default. On the first disc he tried, it attempted to make 10 different files, and he didn't see a way to change the sort of settings that Handbrake offers, such as the compression rate or target playback device. Could we explain a bit how to best use MKV and its interface? And I'll pass this one over to Rob.
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing to know about MakeMKV is that you're not going to get any sort of like compression ratio or target file device or anything like that settings, because all it does is opens the disk, reads every file that's on the disk. By default, it ignores any files that are shorter than 120 seconds, 2 minutes in duration. Although some people like to change that in the preferences, because occasionally there are really, really short special features if you're looking to save those. But by default, 2 minutes is the shortest file it'll look for on any disk that you're opening. And then all it does is turn each of those files into its own separate MKV file. It doesn't recompress it. It doesn't do any adjustments to the image or the sound or anything like that. It just turns each individual file on the disk into an MKV. Now, naturally, a lot of people are only looking to back up the main movie. And so when you open up the disk, you'll see a whole list of all the files that it has found that are longer than 2 minutes, and there are check boxes next to each of those, so you can deselect everything except the largest file. It's always going to be the largest file in there that is the main movie. If it's a Blu-ray disc that, say, had both a director's cut and a theatrical cut on the same disc and used seamless branching on the disc to do that, you might see two that are only very slightly different in size, or might even be identical size. Another tip with MakeMKV is it might be about the only program you would be using these days that actually makes good use of Java. Because most of us don't have Java installed on our computers anymore, but if you do, there are some discs out there where, to combat piracy, what the studios did is create essentially dozens, sometimes hundreds of dummy files, all of which look to have the same size as the main movie feature. And you're like, how?
I'm not Marvel. Disney does that like crazy.
Yeah, so you're like, how the heck Lionsgate for sure does it on everything they release. And it's like, how do you find the correct one? Well, if you have Java installed, it'll be the first one on the list. That greatly simplifies things. So the other little tidbit in the interface before you actually hit the button that says MakeMKV is that not all of the audio options will have check marks next to them by default. There are ways you can like script that within it to make that happen, but honestly, it's not that hard to just make sure that you have a check mark next to the highest level. That might be Dolby True HD, that might be DTS HD Master Audio. It doesn't tend to actually label Atmos or DTS X, but by default, it usually just selects the Dolby Digital 5.1 or DTS 5.1, and you want to make sure you have the highest level of audio with a check mark next to it. And that's it. As long as you have the check marks next to the things that you want, you hit Make MKV, and you will have an MKV file of the main movie. If you want to back up all the special features, that'll be all the other files. That'll be much smaller in size. And sometimes what I'll do is just checkmark everything, go back, have a look through it, and delete essentially all of them, except for maybe one or two special features that I wanted to keep.
So he's using a Windows 10 PC, and he can use Atmos for Windows. That seems to work fine for actual Atmos content, but for all other audio content, he's found that he has to manually switch back to stereo or multi-channel output. Otherwise, his AV receiver doesn't have the option to upmix. Mm-hmm. That is, yes, welcome to the world of the Xbox One circa 1 week ago. So is there an automatic way to switch back and forth, or is it the same situation as the Xbox One? Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, it's the same. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, with Windows is always decoding and remixing all audio inside of Windows before it gets sent out of Windows. Now, individual piece of software by individual piece of software, you could look for different audio drivers that bypass the Windows mixer. That is sort of one way to get around this, but you would have to do that on a individual app by app basis to make sure that their audio output is using a different set of drivers, not the regular Windows mixer. If you're using the regular Windows mixer, then it's always going to decode everything inside of itself, mix it all together into a single output, and then put it into whatever container you have chosen. If it's stereo, everything comes out as stereo. If it's uncompressed 5.1, everything comes out as uncompressed 5.1. If it's Atmos, everything comes out as Atmos, even though you'll still only have the original channel count inside of that container. So, yeah, unless you want to deal with individually setting audio drivers for each program, then you'll just have to manually switch back and forth.
There's a cockroach I have to go
kill. Lovely.
It's just disgusting.
He got away from the poison.
No, he's dying.
He's dying.
He's still not.
He got somewhat away.
He got somewhat away. He's looking to get out, but I know for a fact that she like made a moat of poison around my house. She's like, if they get out of here, they're not going far. All right. So Alvin got a new BenQ projector, and the throw distance is such that he basically needs to have it right at the back of his room. There's a soffit on the back wall. So to get the necessary height, he put the projector on a shelf just below the soffit. And to get the image aligned on the screen, the projector needed to be upside down. Yes, that
makes sense.
Sometimes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. He's got some adjustable rubber feet, and it seems to be working just fine. But is it okay to support the projector, upside down projector this way? Should he just get a shallow ceiling mount and mount it to the underside of a soffit instead? No, dude, this is fine.
This looks absolutely fine to me. He has managed to align the image onto his screen, and the first image that he sent us of what he was viewing on his large projection screen, that is a scary thing to be looking at that size, man. That's a picture of AVRant. That's Tom and I side by side, blown up to ridiculous proportions. Yes, he has a much more pleasing.
The lip sync must be just driving them nuts.
A much more pleasing image of some Avengers in the other image he sent. But the projector itself, he's got the feet positioned towards the edges. I might question a little bit if you had the feet like in the middle of because it's just a plastic top. I don't know what the support structure is like inside, but he's got them, positioned towards the edges where there should be plenty of plastic to hold the weight. It is not a heavy projector by any means, and I see no problem with this.
All right, Chris. Chris asks, would there be any benefit to applying green glue directly to the studs and then hanging the first layer of drywall, or should green glue only go between the first and second layers of drywall? I'm trying to think of there. I can't think of what the benefit would be, since you're going to be drilling directly into the structure anyways.
Well, I think there's two thoughts going on here. First of all, would having some kind of damping in between the studs and the first layer of drywall do anything? And the answer really there is no, effectively not, because with that first layer of drywall screwed directly into those studs, you've more or less short-circuited any sort of damping that would be taking place there. And really, what we want to damp is the sandwich of the 2 layers of drywall. In between those 2 layers of drywall, we want the green glue. That's creating your damped layer sandwich. They call it constrained layer damping. And the whole idea is that the vibrations of the first layer of drywall will have a much more difficult time getting transmitted to the second layer of drywall. And that whole sandwich then is a damped layer of material. So that's really where it's your benefit. Now, the other aspect is that sometimes you hear about applying glue to the studs before you apply your drywall, and that's typically when you're going to be using nails to hold the drywall onto the studs, which is very common. Most professional drywallers use nails, not screws, because it is much, much faster for them to be able to just nail in the drywall. And if you want to make sure that you basically never have a popped nail, and it's highly unlikely that you're ever going to have a popped nail, or that you're going to see the head of the nail through the the tape, the drywall tape that's applied into the seams, then you sometimes apply glue to the stud to prevent nail pops. But that's really what that is for, and it wouldn't be the green glue type. So really no need to do that. That's additional cost and time that you don't really need to do. And yeah, that would be it. Green glue in between the 2 layers of drywall. Tom has not returned from his odyssey to kill a cockroach yet, so I will say that Karl R is the next person up. Tom is sitting back down. I've just introduced Karl R, but not read his question.
Sorry,
That's
I
okay.
didn't find it. Got away. So I had to go get a shoe. By the time I got back, he was gone. So that's terrifying. He's so fully agonizing pain. Karl, not Karl. I hope you're not in agonizing pain, Karl.
Phrasing.
Jeez, phrasing. Jeez. Are we still doing phrasing? Some businesses and tech analysts have started suggesting that with movie theater chains struggling and even filing for bankruptcy, that it might be the giant tech companies like Amazon and Apple that will swoop in and acquire them. What do we think of that possibility? I think Jeff Bezos buys all kinds of crap. So, yes.
The man certainly seems within the realm of possibility, and
not only that, but think about the leverage that would give him over above and beyond the leverage he already has for over the studios.
That's right.
The movie studios.
And we know that
it's crazy.
Companies like Amazon and Apple, they are getting into making their own content. Amazon has been doing it for a while. Apple has begun it with Apple TV Plus. So the possibility that they will begin making full theatrical movies and own the movie theaters in which they're shown, seems entirely within the realm of possibility to me.
Jeez. Think about how the Academy Awards, the Motion Picture Academy, is going to have to change their rules once Netflix buys AMC.
Right.
And then starts showing all their Netflix original movies in theaters, which has been the big thing why Netflix movies aren't considered for Academy Awards.
These huge tech companies are the ones who have money now. They have been pandemic and recession proof. Essentially. In fact, they might have made more money during this whole thing because people are doing even more at home and ordering even more online. From that point, it makes sense. From the fact that they are making their own content, it makes sense. Seems, dare I say, likely. This would not shock me one little bit if those are the companies that end up buying the movie theater chains.
Right. So Karl found himself reminiscing about his earliest stereo equipment. He actually found his 10th birthday present, which he hadn't thought about in over 30 years, which is a 2-in-1.
Oh, the description's below there. It's
there
all
is.
Sorts of things.
Well, I'm trying to. Let me just look at it. It's a record player.
Definitely.
It's an AM/FM tuner.
Yes.
And it looks like it has an 8-track as well.
That would be it.
Let me see. So it's a JCPenney branded AM/FM stereo 8-track and a turntable combo player. Karl had asked for an 8-track after seeing one at his friend's house, but his dad got him the combo player instead. It was fun remembering his very first home stereo. So what were ours? So I guess my first, I wouldn't call it a stereo. It was like it was in the form factor of a boombox, but it would be terrible as a boombox because it it was too heavy and too awkward, and it was really meant to be, the speakers were really meant to be taken off and then separated out into different sections. But it was a CD player double cassette.
Okay.
It may have had a radio. I would not know because I wouldn't have used it. But I was big into dubbing or copying my friends' tapes and then copying from CDs to tapes so I could play them in my car because I didn't have any CD player in my car for obvious reasons at the time frame. But that was when I was in high school. That was probably the first thing. But I had my eye on like the Sears catalog. Where they would have those big Kenwood systems that had the record player on top and then like the graphic equalizer and the cassette player and reel to reel maybe on there, and then two big speakers with drivers in very odd locations, really, that I think back on it. But I had my eye on one of those, but my parents never had enough money to get me anything like that.
All right. Well, I'm going to only consider the first thing that was actually like mine. I'm not going to consider what my dad owned as my stereo system or what my sister had. What I got first, so I mean, I guess the first audio equipment that was all my own was, I did get a Walkman first and then a Discman. So I had a Walkman and then a Discman, but that's not really a stereo. That's portable. So the first one that I had was a RCA 5.1 home theater in a box. I went over to Future Shop, which was like the big box store in Canada before Best Buy swooped in and bought them up, because all the things that used to be Future Shop are Best Buys. Now, for a while, Future Shop and Best Buy coexisted, even though they were both owned by Best Buy. But it was Future Shop. Went over there. They had this RCA 5.1 home theater in a box on sale. I got it because even way back then, I knew enough that the home theater in the box with the physically biggest speakers had the best chance of actually sounding somewhat decent. So within the very limited price range that I had, this RCA home theater in a box had the physically largest speakers. I soon learned that the so-called 6.5-inch subwoofer was not a subwoofer. It did make sounds. It did make noises.
We'll do that.
Far
along.
Not great noises, but that was also a cool experience because the first place I set it up was it actually wasn't. By then, my sister had moved out of my parents' place. I was still living with my parents at the time because this was just like the tail end of high school. And so what used to be my bedroom, I moved into what used to be my sister's bedroom because that was bigger. And then what used to be my bedroom, that is where I set up this first. And the first thing I ever watched on it was X-Men, the 1999 X-Men.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that scene at the beginning with the rain coming down. Now, because this was set up in a bedroom and it was really close, it was a one-seat theater setup. Like my mom commented, like she's like, "That rain is so convincing. Like you felt like you were getting wet." We moved that 5.1 system out to the living room, and the effect was not the same. So I quickly began learning about room acoustics from that experience. So yeah, that was mine.
There you go, Matt. Matt has been using a 55-inch LG LH90 for the past 10 years. Rob had one of those, right?
I still have it. I can't bring myself to sell it because I know nobody besides me will appreciate it, but Matt does. So thank you, Matt, for being an LH90.
Why? Why do you appreciate it?
It was.
Why won't anybody else? Is it 3D? Is it the problem?
It actually isn't 3D. It was one of the first full array local dimming LCDs. Certainly, I think it was the first that LG ever made. They did a really good job on it, and then for years afterward, nothing equaled it until like more recent full array local dimming. So yeah, I just can't bring myself to part with it, even though I really don't use it anymore.
All right. So he's sitting 9 feet away, and there's really no option to move the seats or the TV location. It's an open concept space with no real light control, so a projection setup isn't feasible either, even though he loved the huge screen size. His budget's around $2,000, so he's thinking a 75-inch LCD makes the most sense. He'd love to get OLED, but it's a size versus price situation. Most of his friends have lower price LCDs and he hasn't been impressed. Even compared to his 10-year-old 1080p LH90, he sees a lot of dirty screen effect and uneven backlighting on his friends' TVs. So what should he get? Vizio's 2020 lineup seems to have been delayed. Is the 2019 Vizio P Quantum X the way to go? I mean, so OLED's definitely out, right?
I mean, if you wanted the 77-inch size, you can find them for about $4,000 now, which, keep in mind...
It's double his budget.
It's way out of his budget. I mean, I'm just saying, when they came out, they were $10,000. So within the span of not quite 3 years now, they've come down to $4,000. So that has been a price drop. But yeah, it's certainly not at the $2,000 price point. A 65-inch, you could get an OLED for $2,000, 65-inch, but 9 feet away, that's yeah, it's not going to look big. It's going to look bigger than your 55-inch, but it's not going to be like a cinematic experience. I have to agree with you. And it's not as though there aren't any 75-inch LCDs that are really, really good looking. Now, the Vizio P Quantum X, its big claim to fame is that it has a lot of local zimming zones. I think second only to, at this time, like there used to be Sony's Z9D, but that was 1 year that they made that, and then Samsung's Q90 series. So other than those, the P Quantum X has about the most local dimming zones, and that's really its claim to fame. But you mentioned dirty screen effect, and if there's one thing that the Vizios suffer from, it's some dirty screen effect and some banding too. A very visible banding, like in the bright images, you can see some vertical and sometimes horizontal bands. And if that type of artifact really bothers you, it's tough for me to say that the Vizio P Quantum X is the way to go, despite its good local dimming. The one I would really point you to is actually going back like a couple of years now, but you can still get Sony's X900F. All right, we're up to the H now. We went through there was a 950G, and now there's a 900H and a 950H. But honestly, the X900F, because it's less expensive, it's $1,800 for the 75-inch over at Best Buy right now, so within your budget for the size you want. And that year, for whatever reason, they had good panels, which, look, all LCDs can have a little bit of dirty screen effect. You can't get rid of it entirely, but it was minimal, and it had a good local dimming backlight system on that X900F. So that's actually the one I'll point you to. The subsequent years with the G and the H, they've put in their wide angle filter thingy to try and make the viewing angles wider, and that has decreased the contrast and made things like dirty screen effect worse. So that's why I favor the 900F, because you can still get it.
All right. Was that was only a question? It was only a question. Okay. Bobby wants more tactile feel from his, or a tactile impact from his bass. His dual PB1000 subs sound good, but he wants to feel much stronger impact, so he can sit connected bass shakers directly to his chairs, but they seem to roll off around 30 hertz, and he wants to feel a lot more bass and a lot lower than that. So he thought he might get some ButtKicker tactile transducers. Is that there? We got ButtKickers.
Hey, he's got like the Aura bass shakers, the inexpensive bass shaker ones, and he's thinking he might upgrade to ButtKicker brand tactile transducers. Okay.
They're supposed to respond all the way down to 10 hertz, and he basically has 2 pairs of seats, so he figured he'd make a platform with some isolation feet for both pairs of seats and connect a ButtKicker to each platform. Mm-hmm. So the isolation feet would be on the
platform.
Chairs?
Yeah.
On the
platform.
platform,
the platform would
ground.
Be separated from the actual floor with some isolation feet. A ButtKicker would be on the platform, so the whole platform is being jostled up and down by the ButtKicker, and then his seat's just standing on the platform.
Why doesn't he just put isolation feet on the chair and then put the ButtKicker on the chair?
Because then he'd need a ButtKicker for each chair.
But he's going to have a ButtKicker for each chair.
No, he's got 4 chairs, and he was only going to buy 2 ButtKickers.
Pairs of seats.
Yeah.
Pairs of seats. I just saw pairs and thought it was just 2 seats. Yeah. But as he was reading up on doing that, he came across the Boss Baffle Open Sub Shaker. It's an inexpensive platform, just a sheet of plywood with isolation feet. Then inexpensive subwoofer drivers are mounted in the plywood with the faces of the drivers facing the floor. The magnets are sticking up, and you put your seats over those exposed magnets. The wattage is kept low, and the signal is heavily filtered with a mini DSP. Lots of people in the forums love it. What do we think? I think it sounds like a terrible idea.
How did I know Tom would say that?
just there's very little of that sounds like that's a good idea from what I can tell. I mean, first of all, I mean, I understand that it's heavily, whatever, but the last thing I want is another bass driver. Like if something's shaking my, if it's shaking the chair, that's one thing. That's a thing that it does. But this is creating sound, but using the movement of the driver to shake the platform rather than having a piston or whatever that is that they use inside of a ButtKicker or any tactile inducer.
Yeah, I mean,
do the shaking.
The thing that this is most...
It's like...
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing that this is most similar to is the Clark synthesis tactile transducers, since those are basically a voice coil system, just like a regular speaker driver, but not attached to any sort of actual exposed to the air woofer the way that these are. These are just buying, off the shelf, inexpensive subwoofer drivers and using them for their physical movement, but there's no way that you can separate the physical movement from the air movement. These are still going to move the air. Now, I first want to warn Bobby, the claim that was made on the forums that because the backs of the drivers are exposed, that is somehow canceling out all of the output, that is not true. In a technical sense, if these were much shorter wavelengths, then directly to the sides of the drivers, you would have a dipole null. But the idea that all sound is being canceled just because there's no back to these things, well, if that were the case, then any ported subwoofer would be silent, because that would be the same thing of the air moving in both directions. So that is false. That is just completely untrue, that these aren't contributing any sound pressure level to the room. But the reason why people aren't noticing it altering their audible bass is because the volume level of these things is kept really, really low. You don't have to physically move these things very much at all when you're on a floating platform to feel the movement without the air movement that these drivers are creating being very much at all. So that's the reason why that can sort of work, but it is contributing air movement to your room. There's no way around that. Okay, so let's put aside the idea. So neither Tom nor I are fans of using tactile transducers ourselves. We just aren't fans of them, but some people are, some people love them. I got no beef with that. You have tried subwoofers that we told you are the appropriate size for your room. You positioned them where we told you to put them, and you're like, they sound great. I just want to physically get rocked more than these subwoofers are going to do. And I'm okay with that. You tried accuracy to the signal. This you want. I got no problem. I would back a ButtKicker purchase for you. They are my favorite tactile transducers, but they certainly do cost more. So this Boss platform, could it function? Yeah, it can function. It can absolutely function. You've got a thing that is responding to the bass signal. It's running through a mini DSP to make sure that it's not getting the same equalized signal as what's being sent to your subwoofers. And it is just physically moving these drivers back and forth on a floating platform. You're going to feel those vibrations. It's going to contribute some air movement, but the volume is kept really, really low. And the recommendation is to actually only have it responding from 40 hertz down, that it's doing nothing above that. So again, it's tough to literally even hear those frequencies. Anyway, I'm not super against this. It is inexpensive. It should function if you follow the instructions that are given. Yeah, I mean, I haven't tried it for myself, but there's nothing about it that is actually that complicated or difficult to understand. It's not something I would personally go for. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Just look at the picture, the platform. I mean, I guess they're underneath the chair, but it all just screams something. I mean, that is go terribly wrong.
That is definitely a tripping hazard.
Yeah, well,
I don't have the pictures.
It's under the chair.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you've got the floor and then this little step of this platform that's hovering off the ground, and typically people cover that with carpet afterwards. I'm just showing the unfinished version so you can really see the drivers and platform if you're looking at the pictures on YouTube. But yeah, that's definitely a tripping hazard. You might want to put some little LED strip lights around the outside so you don't trip over the darn thing. Yeah.
Well, whatever you decide to do, let us know. I mean, I understand wanting to save money. I'm all about that. And like Rob said, I mean, there are, it's not like, even though what they're saying about how, the position of the drivers and how it's sound, how it cancels out sound or whatever, even their indication that is wrong. The fact that the volume is so low it's probably okay. But to me, I just don't want to add anything to my room that's going to make any noise that I don't want there to be, know, and it includes my children. Sometimes I kick them out for the exact same reason.
And I mean, just to explain, the only reason why they have the drivers facing downward, that was strictly about wanting to raise the height of the seat as little as possible. Obviously, if you had the magnet towards the floor and the driver facing up, you'd have to have more clearance below the platform just for them. So that is really the only reason. This was all about adding as little height as possible. The movement, which direction the driver is facing. I mean, you could have them facing sideways. It would be the same darn thing.
Right. I mean, and if you actually made a normal size platform, you could have them recessed into the platform,
if you had
and then just put a
rear row
grill over the top. Yeah. All right, Alfonso. Alfonso is using a pair of Klipsch Reference Premiere RP160M bookshelf speakers as front for left and right. These were the first generation of the Reference Premiere series, and it's the 6.5 bookshelf model. He's been stuck with his BIC Center that he's had for 7 years. BIC is what does that BIC stands for? I don't remember. Do we know? Does it have it?
I can't remember offhand anymore.
I can't either. Yeah, I used to know. Anyways, it's a company, very affordable, very entry-level speakers. Nothing wrong with them. Often recommended when you're like on a serious budget and you just want to try. It's like it's equivalent of a home theater in a box, maybe a little bit better than the home theater box, depending on which of the big American ones you get. It was cheap back then, and now it's cheap and old, so he wants an upgrade. So does he get a Klipsch center? If so, which one? He wants to keep the budget to $300. Should he consider some other center, maybe an SVS Prime? Not with Klipsch. Klipsch, I mean, generally speaking, I want to match Klipsch with either Klipsch or other horn-loaded speakers, because these are also horn-loaded, right?
BIC has some that are horn-loaded and some that aren't. I mean, they're most popular where they're acoustic, the BIC acoustic, which are a horn-loaded design, and were often, recommended as the inexpensive alternative to Klipsch because of that, because they're very efficient, as most horn-loaded designs are.
But you could go with like an HSU has their horn-loaded speakers.
I wouldn't.
But I don't know if they fit this budget.
Say that the timbre of the HSU horn and the Klipsch horn is the same, though. Now, I mean, really, I'm gonna say, get a Klipsch center, get a Klipsch Reference Premiere center. Going from generation 1 to generation 2 is no problem. And over on Amazon, you can get the RP500C center. It's just over $300. So it's within striking
Klipsch
distance.
should match with Klipsch just fine.
And especially same series. It's just different generations. Now, he might have been thinking, because, of course, they have different sizes of centers in the Klipsch Reference Premiere lineup, and the 500C that I'm suggesting is the one that has two 5.25-inch drivers rather than a single 6.5. I want you to note, if you look at the specs, its efficiency and power handling rating is actually identical to your bookshelf speakers, whereas the larger center that has dual 6.5-inch drivers actually has higher power handling and slightly higher efficiency than your bookshelf models. So if you're actually talking which of the center speakers perfectly matches the specs of your existing RP160M bookshelf model, it's the 500C, and it's the one that really comes close to your budget. So that's what I would do, because the timbre match is going to be perfect, and the efficiency and the power handling are identical to what you already have. There's really nothing to balk at.
So JR is using Mirage speakers with a 12-inch Mirage sub. He had the sub on his front wall in between the center and his front right speaker, but then he did a subwoofer crawl. He was rather amazed by the differences in the bass sweep as he moved around his room. In some locations, he would have sworn someone was turning the volume dial back and forth. He ended up moving the sub to his left wall, and that is where the bass sweep sounded the most even throughout the whole sweep without any major dips.
Great.
But now when he tries to play very low frequency, he hears distortion. Sometimes a bit of a buzz, and other times it almost sounds like a crunch. That's not what you want to hear. Most of that noise can be attributed to the rattling of his framed artwork against the walls, though, rather than the sub itself. Is he right to assume that since he no longer has any big humps, he's basically just discovering the limitations of his Mirage subwoofer now? He's about ready to pull the trigger on a pair of SVS 2000 Pro Series subs, but he would rather not spend $1,500 if he doesn't have to.
That's a lot of money.
As we all. Once he damps his artwork and gets rid of that rattling, will the SVS dual subs be worth it, or is there anything else he could do to improve deep bass further? Well, okay. First things first, you got to stop the rattling of everything else in your room before you can know what's actually
what
going
is
on.
actually the sub itself. Yeah, because the sub might not be making very many noise at all. Although a crunch sound that can't be attributed to I wonder if it's starting to bottom out. This is not an impossibility.
Okay. So crunch is not usually what I would associate with bottoming out. Bottoming out is more of a clang.
Yeah.
Usually it sounds a lot like metal on metal, because that's exactly
what it is.
what's happening. So I mean, that is physically what's happening. It sounds like a clang. Crunch is more concerning, but also it's weird enough that I don't think it might
hopefully
necessarily
that
be coming
is
from the
just
sub.
the artwork. I mean, yeah.
So once you damp all the artwork and stuff like that, and get everything, get a little putty behind stuff or little pieces of rubber insulation tape and put it back there, and you're not hearing any of that anymore. Because believe me, I had to do the same thing when I got my 2 subs in here. I mean, I had to do it to every door frame, because the doors were rattling in the frame every time the subs were hitting, and it was distracting. Once you've done all that, then you can kind of decide whether or not if the sub's still making noise, well, you've got some issues. Now, remember, this is probably at the very, very lowest end of the bass, which you may not be able to identify so well with your subwoofer crawl as being something that is experiencing a huge hump or a huge null. It could also be that because you have more even bass and you're able to get the volume more even across all these frequency ranges, you're able to turn the subwoofer a lot higher. If you think about this, if you had like a 10 dB hump someplace that you weren't able to really knock down because of what was going on in the room, then your subwoofer would, the receiver would say, well, this is as loud as this thing can go, because if you go any louder than this, everything's going to sound way too loud, at least during this one little section right here that's going to be so loud that you risk damaging the sub and everything else. But now that it's all kind of even, it can raise the overall level. So now the sub at the very lowest end, or maybe not even the lowest end, the sub somewhere is now not being able to keep up with what the demands of your room are, because that's what it really comes down to. It comes down to your room. You're trying to fill this room with bass, and before, I'm just going to make up a thing. At 75 hertz, you had a 10 dB hump, and at 75 hertz, you can absolutely fill this room up with bass, but nothing else. Everything else was like 10 dB down from that. But now it's all kind of evened out, say within 4 or 5 dB, and now everything is louder, and you're finding this rattling happening because all those lower frequencies, which are now able to shake the stuff in your room, are going. And then you might find out that your sub is like, wait a second, Haas, I can't do that.
Well, we know this sub can't play linearly down to 20 hertz. It's just not within its capabilities. And hey, nothing against that. That's most subs until modern times and over $500. So, no knocking it there. What I would say, something that you can do for free is fold up a blanket and put it underneath your existing sub to see if having some additional damping below your sub to give it more physical separation, something squishy beneath the sub. He does have carpeting, so it's not as though he has zero damping whatsoever, but I don't know. It's hard to see if there's anything below his sub. I don't think he has a damping pad, a subdued, or isolation feet or something like that. So fold up a blanket is good enough to give it a trial and see if having some additional damping below your sub helps with any further rattles or noises or things like that. It certainly might. But in terms of if you want to hit linear right down to 20 hertz, there's nothing more you can do with your existing equipment to make that happen. It's just not within the capability of the sub you own. If that's what you want to do, you will be needing to look at a subwoofer upgrade.
And I mean, it's not beyond the realm. No, I'm going to tell you this right now. It's not outside of, I think, a good idea to just buy one SVS sub right now.
Start with
one.
Yep.
Just get one. Put it right where you found out is the best place for this Mirage sub. Take the Mirage sub. Do not plug it back in. I know you're gonna say, but now I have 2 subs. I can put 2. No, this sub is not capable. We already know that. Just go put it away. Now put the SVS where the Mirage was. Rerun Odyssey and all whatever else you've got going on in there, and then see how this thing does. If you're still noticing, a crunching or whatever sound, well, it's not the SVS. So you got to find where that is in your room. It's got to be something else in your room. You don't know what it is, you'll find it. But you may find that depending on how many seats you care about, that might be good enough for you. I would then also suggest taking it out of that spot, put it back on your main seat, and then redo the subwoofer crawl, because you're going to be it's going to be activating a lot more lower frequencies than you were hearing before, and that will adjust possibly where your placement is. It's always going to be easier and better to get two, but you can always start with one. Infinite Gary says, if you were using a phantom center, are the left and right speakers playing louder than if a center were present? Or to put it another way, if you add a center speaker to a stereo setup, does that reduce the volume coming from the left and right speakers? No. It's just no. The easy answer is no, because think of it this way: when you put the sounds into the left and right, to create the center, it has to be level matched with the left and right. So it's not like it's not like adding more flour to a cake or something. It's all part of the same sound, and it all has to be the same volume. It's just the phasing between the sounds that are split between the left and right gives you that phantom center.
I can see where the thinking is, because you're thinking like in the case of you have a phantom center and yet there's still a center channel that is like, it's more sound. So if my left and right speakers are now playing more sound, then shouldn't that mean that the volume coming out of each of them is louder? But that isn't how waves work. What we're doing is taking what could have been a wave pattern that was being played by a physical center speaker. We're now dividing that wave pattern evenly and having that wave pattern that was the center channel added to the wave pattern that is the left channel and the right channel. But when you add those waves together, it creates a new complex wave pattern that is not louder than any of the existing ones. It's just a new wave pattern as those waves got all added to each other. There might be individual frequencies along that wave that were louder than the individual because both of them are playing at the same time, and they happen to line up in a moment in time right there where they add to each other, but it's just that you've created a new complex wave pattern. It is difficult to picture how waves are able to do that, how they're able to move right through each other without actually changing like the overall volume that's coming out. But that's the actual situation.
Right. Jay asks, what's our take on Norwegian speaker brand Arendal Sound? Arendal Sound.
Nobody seems to know how to pronounce it. Arendal. It's like Lord of the Rings. Arendal, I'm
right?
pretty sure it's Arendal. I mean, usually online people say Arendal, but I think it's Arendal.
Arendal?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I think it's Arendal. I mean, it's like Frozen. It's Arendal.
Right. It's Frozen Lord of the Rings. Yeah. I approve.
That's how I would pronounce it. I don't think it's Arendal. I think it's Arendal.
Arendal. People talking about. So a couple of popular YouTubers, oh well, there we go, we're done, have featured their speakers and subs, and their reviews seem impressive. Jay and his wife both really like their looks and finish options, but he wants to be careful not to get swept up in marketing hype. It sounds like the ship has sailed on that one, sir. Okay. So does anything about the design or claims ring false or come across as marketing rubbish to either of us? Physically, the cabinets are quite large and made of HDF. I actually talked to a speaker manufacturer about why he doesn't use HDF. He gave me two reasons. One, the cost, because it's more expensive. And two, it resonates at different frequencies than MDF does, and they're harder to deal with. That's what he told me. So I don't know if that's true. He goes, the most obvious design characteristics, large wave guides around the tweeters that match the diameter of the 8-inch or 6.5-inch woofers. And the subwoofers are all side-firing designs with one or two 13.8-inch drivers, sealed or ported models with 500, 1,000, or 1,000-watt DSP amplifiers. What's our take? I'm looking at them for the first time right now.
Alrighty. Well, while you're doing that, I'll give my opinion, which is, the overall construction, the drivers that are used, the sort of basic designs of these speakers, I have no beef with. There's nothing there that sticks out to me as something that would not work, a type of design that I would absolutely avoid, nothing like that. I will mention, with a waveguide this size, because they're using very large, unusually large waveguides. I mean, essentially a horn. Essentially a circular horn is what they've got going on there. When you use a waveguide of that type of diameter, they're getting the main thing that I'm sure they're going after, which is the even dispersion pattern, so that the sound that is being dispersed from the larger woofers to either side and the sound that is being dispersed from that tweeter within that horn waveguide, the dispersion is very, very even. That is similar to like what KEF achieves with their concentric driver design. But when the waveguide is that large, it means necessarily that the tweeter is physically farther away from the woofers, which if you're not going to have bad intermodulation distortion, which is where two drivers are both playing the same frequencies at the same time, and you get these ripple patterns in the waves that come out, to avoid that, the tweeter would have to play very, very low. Now, the Arendal tweeter, according to the specs, does go down to a crossover point at 1.5 kilohertz, which is lower than normal. Most tweeters cross over at 2 or 2.5, some even up at 3. 1.5 is lower, so that would indicate to me that they are aware of this and have taken a step to ameliorate that. And the crossover design is a steep slope design, and that is another thing that you can do to help with this. So all of the design choices, and these are choices, that's what speaker designers do, they make sense. There's logic behind the choices that are being made. There's a certain advantage that they're getting from this horn waveguide, but there are some disadvantages, and they're doing the correct type of things to offset those disadvantages. That all makes sense. The subwoofer designs look entirely reasonable to me. You know, their front faces get to be a little bit narrower because they have the drivers facing sideways, so the cabinets are taller and deeper as a result. But if that's the look that you want, that's where you want the logo placed. No problem with that. It's DSP controlled amplifiers that should be able to take a 13.8 inch driver and get down to the frequencies that they claim. Really, the only thing in the specs that I really didn't like was saying that everything has a break-in period of 50 hours. I'm like, why is that in your specifications? But whatever, I'm willing to overlook that. It doesn't mean everything else they did is bad or anything like that. That's my take. What's yours, Tom?
It's very odd to have a two-way tower with a single tweeter and 4 or 5.5 inch drivers.
Yeah, everything they do is two-way.
That's really odd. I don't know that. And if you look at they're really trying to overlap those two woofers with the tweeter, because they everything else is a little bit further away from each other, but the woofers are on top of the tweeters. So Rob talked about the speaker design a bit here, and that's fine. A lot of what I'm seeing on this website is coming soon. I mean, there's a lot of THX.
Yeah, I mean, they really have one series that is available, and that was their first and largest THX Ultra Certified series. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going
sure.
on. But they've got height speakers that look exactly like not exactly, but very similar designs to the
Prime Elevations.
To the Prime
they
Elevation
are wedgies.
Speakers. Yeah. So I mean, as far as the design goes, I would, if it were me, I would not buy these off of a website.
Okay.
Not before I heard them. I would have to hear them first.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you're going to do that, but this is it's not that odd of a design.
No.
And like Rob said, they've done stuff. It's very the Aperion Audio Veris Grand speakers. They also have a tweeter that crosses over very low, and it's some real benefits to that. So I've got very little problems with those, but I would want to hear these in person
sure.
first. It's just enough questions in my mind before I would be able to just look at them and go, yeah, that looks good. It's a little different,
but it's certainly not where just by looking at them we're going to say no, don't even bother, because it's not that type of unusual or bad design.
And I've seen that sort of thing before too. I mean, and there's still like speakers that people recommend that I'm like, really, six tweeters, right? 6 tweeters is what we're going with. That doesn't really make sense. My brain can't wrap myself around why 6 tweeters in a grid pattern.
Now, I will say I'm not a fan of the surround speaker design that they went for, this so-called triaxial design, where on the front face, it's got just a bookshelf speaker complement of a woofer and a tweeter in their horn waveguide. But then on either side, they have a 4-inch, and they call it full range driver in a dipole setup. Now, I don't blame them, because that was a pretty common design years ago. particularly amongst THX speakers like M&K had tri-pole designs that were very similar to this. So I'm not like angry that they basically copied a design that used to exist, but these days with object-based audio, immersive audio formats, that's not the type of speaker that I would recommend as a surround speaker anymore, which is fine because they have alternatives that'll also work as surround speakers, so you don't have to get the one that they called surround. But yeah, that's the only one where I would probably avoid that particular model.
Okie dokie. Sorry, I was reading a review. Jay.
Huh?
Is that right? No.
We just did, Jay. We're one more.
Okay, sorry. Monsignor Arthur?
Yes.
Is that
like that's his title? He's
I'm reading?
Catholic Church.
Okay. All right. Monsignor. What's up, dude? Arthur. I have such a hard time saying the name Arthur.
Oh.
I do. I really don't know why. It just
it's not an unusual name at all.
It's not an unusual name, but for some reason Arthur, it makes my mouth go
it's
weird.
A tongue twister
so
for you.
I apologize. And then Monsignor on top of it just kind of threw me off. So Arthur recently purchased a 55-inch LG CX OLED with the new Sonos Arc soundbar. Geek Squad is scheduled to come and physically install them at the end of the week. He also has an old universal remote that he's actually hoping will be able to stop using. But if he still needs it, Geek Squad will need to reprogram it for him. His current sources are an Apple TV, a Sony Blu-ray player, and a Cox cable DVR. The TV is going above a fireplace, and all of the components are in a side cabinet with a door that hides them from view. His existing sound system are all in-ceiling speakers driven by a Pioneer Elite receiver. It's never been great. He's hoping to bypass all of that and just use the Sonos Arc soundbar now. So will it be possible to just use the new OLED and Sonos Arc with all three of his sources and control all of it with just the OLED's remote? He wants to know enough ahead of time to be able to tell Geek Squad what he wants done to make sure it is connected and working the way it should. Now, I hear what you're saying about how things weren't sounding good before, and I'm hoping that a soundbar will sound better.
There's every possibility because all the speakers being in the ceiling, that could easily have been all of your problems, just that.
Yeah, that could have been a lot of it. So I'm hoping that this will actually solve your problem. Now Sonos is I don't have much experience with Sonos, so I apologize.
This is their brand new one. This is the first one they have that does Atmos is the Sonos Arc.
Right. So Sonos, I thought, was pretty good about working with other remotes. Am I wrong about that, Rob?
No, I mean. So what you need to be able to control of the soundbar once it's set up is really just power on, power off, and volume. And you will definitely be able to do that. You'll be able to do that through HDMI CEC, which is actually, this is the type of instance where I'm going to say that's probably what you want to use in this case. What you need to know about how Geek Squad should physically connect all of this. There's not much choice because the Sonos Arc has one input and it is an HDMI eARC port. That's all the Sonos Arc has. There's no other way to connect this thing to your TV. It does not even have any HDMI inputs of its own. So this means all of your sources must be plugged into your new LG OLED TV, and then your OLED's one eARC output has to be connected to the Sonos Arc. That's how sound is going to get from the TV into the Sonos Arc soundbar. You have three sources. The LG TV has 4 HDMI inputs, including its one ARC port. So you are okay on that front. You won't be able to add any more sources. You will have used up all of your ports.
All of his stuff is in a closet off to the side.
And I'm guessing you're going to have to run more HDMI cables. That's what I was getting at. Yeah. And unfortunately, if this is all being done by Geek Squad on the spot, they might be trying to sell you some very overpriced HDMI cables. You're going to have one HDMI cable running from each source to your television, and that is probably a longer HDMI cable. I'm imagining what he has right now is a cable going from each source to his AV receiver, and that's probably all inside the cabinet with short HDMI cables that might not reach to his TV. You're going to have an HDMI cable from each source to your television, and then one HDMI cable from your television to the Sonos Arc soundbar, because the Sonos Arc soundbar really limits you in how it can be connected. That's the only way to do it. So Might not be enough time, but if you have the opportunity to purchase some much less expensive HDMI cables beforehand, figure out the length that you need, you might be able to save money there instead of buying them when Geek Squad arrives. That's the connection. That's not difficult.
There should be already one cable running anyways from.
Oh yeah, there'll be at
receiver
least
up to
one.
the TV.
Yeah, but
He's got at least
he
one
could very
going,
well need two more. Now the part of controlling your Blu-ray player through HDMI CEC for the basic commands of play, pause, stop. You're not going to have an eject button, but if you were ejecting, I guess you were going to have to physically walk up there anyway. But your play, pause, stop, and all that, that'll work through HDMI CEC, so that's okay. Your Cox cable DVR, similar thing for your play, pause, stop, and all that. That'll work, but things like bringing up the guide, bringing up the menu, I'm not sure how well that's going to work. The buttons that are available on the LG remote that came with your OLED, very limited. It has your very basic transport controls, your play, pause, stop, but it doesn't have things for like bringing up your recorded program list, that type of thing. So you very well might need to use your cable DVR remote, the one that came with your Cox cable DVR, to do more of the functions that you want to do. The Apple TV, now that's an interesting one. That'll work just fine through HDMI CEC. But I question whether you're actually even going to need your Apple TV anymore, because the LG OLED has a lot of apps built into it.
Right.
Now, it depends on which apps you really want to use, but one interesting thing, if you're like, I need an Apple TV because I bought a bunch of stuff on iTunes, well, the LG OLEDs now have the Apple TV app that lets you watch anything you purchased from iTunes. That's built right into the TV. So I'm betting you might be able to actually ditch the Apple TV and just use the apps built into your LG OLED. So that would simplify things and remove the need to purchase potentially one longer HDMI cable. I think that pretty much covers it. Really, it's the bringing up your list of recorded shows on your DVR and the guide on the DVR. That would be my main concern, because I don't think that's going to be easy using the LG's remote. But if you're willing to just use the DVR remote and the LG remote, two remotes instead of just one, if that saves you having to do a whole universal remote setup, that he isn't programming himself, right, I think that's acceptable.
There's also, I mean, how dedicated are you to having all that equipment in that closet too?
Right.
I mean, if it doesn't need to be in there, if it can be closer. I mean, the soundbar is obviously going somewhere, so can the equipment go real close to it, and then maybe you can cut down a lot of that cost too. Let us know, Monsignor, how it goes. Joseph.
Oh yes,
Joe,
he signed it Joe, and I forgot to change because originally
that's all right. I don't care. I just recently bought a Denon X4500H to replace his Onkyo TXNR818. At the moment, he has 7.2 speaker setup using SVS Prime towers and sensors and Prime satellites for surrounds and surround back. With dual SVS PC 2000 subs, all in an enclosed 11 by 12 foot room. This is a man who's had to battle some rattles.
Most likely.
This is a man well familiar with rubber insulation tape or that little blue tack stuff. Because, yeah. Some subs.
He put it right in his email. He's like, Tom, I know.
Hey, I approve.
He's clearly been a long-time listener. He knows what you're going to say.
PC 2000s in a small room. You're like, I need a small footprint and the most sub I can get on it. That's right. In fact, I might put two subs on it.
It's the smallest cylinder they make. I've got no beef with it. None whatsoever.
I think it's great. I love me some cylinder subs. I'm sorry. I love the faceplates of Marantz with the little porthole, and I like cylinder subs. That's like old school. I'm sorry. That's just when I first started researching subwoofers. SVS was in HSU were both selling cylinder subs with outboard amps because they hadn't learned how to put the amps in them yet. That's how old school. I was like, that's a subwoofer. I want it, and I've never wavered from that desire. Anyway, so he ran Odyssey and noted that the trim levels for his front towers were set to -6. He's looking ahead to expand to Atmos, so he figured he could use his Onkyo 818 as an amplifier for his left and right now, and then Denon can power the other 9 speakers. He set the Onkyo to pure direct with all of his trim levels back at 0, and he put the master volume dial at 0. When he ran Odyssey again, the trim levels for his front, left, and rights were now only set to -1 in the Denon. So does that mean the Denon's internal amps were actually providing more power than the Onkyo 818, even with the Onkyo only powering 2 speakers? Does that defeat the purpose and indicate that he should use the Onkyo to power his rear heights instead? Let me see. Let me see if I got this right. So he set it to 0. He put the Onkyo in pure direct. So in theory, no bass management or anything else. It should be just sending the signal straight through.
Should be just a dumb amplifier at that point. Yes.
Dumb
no additional gain, no attenuation. Master volume at 0.
Put the master volume to 0, and now the Denon is trimming it down by 1 instead of trimming down by 6. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the Denon was giving more power than the Onkyo is, but that's fine.
Well,
I mean,
even that is not necessarily the case. I mean, the power being given is a calculation of here's what the signal said to play, here's what the speakers requested in response to that signal. So the actual amount of power being drawn by the speakers is the same in either case because the speakers haven't changed. So to get to the requested sound pressure level, which from the Odyssey test tones is going to be 75 decibels, the wattage being supplied in either case is the same. Now, what has changed is the gain on the preamp signal level that is being sent to the amplifiers prior to that wattage being sent out to the speakers. In the case of the Denon's built-in amps, it is a lower gain level on the signal. But I am not sure whether the gain level that is being sent all inside of the Denon is exactly the same as the gain level that gets sent to the pre-out connections. Because you can...
It could be that the pre-outs are a little bit hotter because they want to make sure that any amp that has one of those auto-on functions will sense
Well, I mean, in this case, it would indicate that the preamp is actually a little bit lower. That the voltage on the preamp is actually a little bit lower. But one thing we know about Denon from Audioholic's measurements is that they actually have a huge voltage range for a pre-out on a consumer AV receiver. They go like all the way up to 4 volts in some cases, which is like ridiculous. There shouldn't be any amplifier you're buying that requires a 4-volt signal to reach full power, but the Denons can kind of do that. So they have a lot of headroom available on their pre-outs. And so really, that's more what's going on here. It's that the pre-amplifier section very well might be slightly different of what's internally fed inside the Denon versus what comes out of the preamp output section, that there's some little thing going on there. There is nothing wrong with your Onkyo using it as an amplifier. Having the the trim level set to -1, what's wrong with that?
Well within range. Yeah. So regardless, so in the end, regardless, if you did this and your receiver then set the trim level to its extremes,
right?
Plus, which I think in the Denon's is 12 dB.
Yeah.
So either plus 12 or -12. That indicates there's a problem.
That's right.
Okay, but anything within that range, especially when it's this close to 0, if it's -6 to +6, -8 to +8, anything within this range means it's well within the standard operating parameters of the amplifier. So the Onkyo can handle it, the Denon can handle it, both of them can handle it. You need an external amplifier. Do you use it for your fronts or do you use it for your heights? I think it literally does not matter.
That is definitely the most likely answer. I would probably still power my front, left, rights just because of we know there's going to be a lot of sound coming out of your front, left, right. So if I'm going to try and offload some of the work that the Denon has to do, I'm going to make it the front, left, right speakers. They're guaranteed to be playing something most of the time, whereas the other speakers might be sitting silent or playing very, very quietly. So yeah, there's no reason to avoid using your Onkyo to power your front, left, right. You're totally within spec here.
So secondly asked, what is the bass sync setting for? I don't remember.
This setting.
I don't even know that I've ever seen this thing. I must have seen it.
So it strictly applies to the actual low frequency effects channel. All right, so this is not something that, very important to distinguish, this is not something that applies to the subwoofer output. You know how on the back of the Denon, the plug there is labeled subwoofer out or sub out. The bass sync setting does not apply to that sub output. It applies to the actual low frequency effects channel in the recording. And what it tries to do there, it's so unnecessary. But there's this theory that if you've set some strange distance settings for all of your speakers, then as a result of that, so the delay that's being applied to some speakers, and if you have a distance setting applied to that subwoofer output, that somehow the low frequency effects channel is now going to be not in correct phase with all of the bass managed bass that got filtered off of the low end of your speakers and sent out of the subwoofer output. That's the theory behind it, right?
Okay.
Because the delays that are being applied to the speaker outputs, not to the channels in the signal. So if you've applied a delay to the bass managed bass, but not the actual low frequency effects channel, then the claim is that somehow the phase of all of that is not what it should be. Now, the real question is here, how in the holy heck would you know what to set that to? There's no way for you to know how you ought to manually adjust that. It's completely unnecessary.
This was somebody was in the boardroom, and this was the hill they were going to die on.
Well,
we need this.
This whole claim
we need this. Give people this control.
This whole claim about phase alignment. I mean, this comes up all the time. It comes up in speaker design. It comes up in amplifier design. It comes up everywhere. This phase thing. It's like, and nobody really seems to understand. It's the magical catch-all of I want to change something, and I'm going to call it the phase because nobody really understands it or can demonstrate how it properly works.
Have you heard of quantum phase? Because that's a very important part of the phase, the quantum X phase.
But again, the notion that so you've got this wave pattern that is the low frequency effects channel, and then it is being combined with the wave patterns of all the bass that's being managed from your speakers, and all of that gets combined into a single new complex wave pattern and played by the subwoofer output. And they're saying, well, you gotta time align that low frequency effects channel to all the other bass, but I'm like, but you have different distance settings for each of your speakers.
Right.
So you can't.
Right.
You can't perfectly. I guess you could pick one speaker and a lot, but it only goes between 0 and minus 16 milliseconds. So if any of your speakers are more than 16 feet away, this still isn't going to work. Just don't worry about it. I mean, I know it's there. It's got a line item in the manual. I can't blame you for asking, what the heck is this thing? But it is very unnecessary, and there is no way to properly adjust it anyway, so please forget about it.
There you go. Next he asks, there is a input level adjust setting that lets you boost or cut the volumes of each input independently. So say that your cable box isn't always louder than your Blu-ray player. Joseph likes that and wants to make use of it, but which input and which device should be used as the point of reference? That doesn't. I mean, I would use my. I don't know. I would probably use my Blu-ray player. I would probably use the lowest one, to be honest with you. You know, the one that you know, or maybe the one I use the most. No, I definitely wouldn't use my the Xbox one. The cable boxes tend to be like super louder than mine.
Yeah.
I would use the lowest one, the one that was the quietest, and use that so that I'm not, boosting the volume of everything else to kind of try to, past where it's supposed to be. I would probably use my Blu-ray player, or my Ultra HD Blu-ray player, which tends to be the one that I have to kick up the volume the most to get to where I consider it to be, a pleasant listening level. The Roku actually has a very similar control to my my Ultra HD Blu-ray player. The Xbox is considerably louder, but even within the Xbox, it's pointless because YouTube is like super loud, and the Blu-rays are not as loud. And then Netflix is like about 10 dB louder than YouTube. I mean, softer than YouTube. But Hulu is a little bit softer than that.
Yeah, it's very tough when the
Amazon Prime
source
is in between.
device itself does a whole bunch of different services. So that is very tough. I tend to agree with you. I'd probably, if I have a standalone Blu-ray player, that's probably what I'm going to use. Now, it's a little bit tricky because there can, unfortunately, even though there's a standard that is supposed to be adhered to, there can be differences from disc to disc.
Right.
Don't use a Disney disc, because Lord knows what volume level they decided to set on a given disc. Disney is bad about reference volume level. Sony, actually, use a Sony disc. Sony is really good about mastering all of their Blu-ray releases to proper reference volume. Sony is the one to go with. So watch a Columbia
those
movie.
Criterion, collections should be good too.
They are too.
I mean, I would be okay with any one of those, but even then, it's really an exercise in futility, because if you've got, like I said, you've got apps, and then disc to disc can be different. Your cable box channel to channel can be different. It's just, I mean, what it does is it just gets you kind of in the ballpark.
But I mean, that is still useful. That can save you from having to lunge for the remote.
Right. So lastly, he asks, should he go with 4 SVS Prime Elevation speakers or 4 in-ceiling speakers to complete his Atmos setup? He doesn't mind the work of installing in-ceiling speakers, and the price of either option is fine by him. So with those aspects considered equal, which do we think is the better way to go? This is, I don't know if anybody's going to consider this to be controversial or not. I just think that in-ceiling speakers are the way to go if you've got the option. Now, I think it's simply, in my mind, because that's the way that Dolby envisioned this was going to work. This is how they, every test they did, at least initially, and I imagine every single recording engineer is using speakers that may not be in ceiling, but are facing straight down and are
at 45-degree elevation angles.
Yeah. And as much as I love my Prime Elevation speakers, they are a stopgap, or they are a compromise in order to get overhead speakers in situations where it's really hard. Like I have a flat roof above there. There's like a couple of inches, or maybe 6 inches total, and it's all wood and God knows what else up there. And there's just no installing in ceiling speakers in my ceiling, so I have no option other than an on-ceiling option, and the Prime Elevations are a great option if that's what you want. But if you have the option, in-ceiling I think is definitely the way to go.
By and large, that would be my catch-all advice. As a general, this is the question posed, that would be what I would say too. But in Joe's specific case, because his room is so small, only being 11 feet by 12 feet, there's every possibility that once he has the speakers the width apart that you would picture and 45-degree elevation angles in front and behind, that's going to be really, really close to either his side walls or his front wall or back wall, to the point that putting a Prime Elevation speaker there is going to be super close to where an in-ceiling would go anyway. But that's specific to a room this small. In most rooms that are going to have a larger ceiling space, that probably wouldn't be the advice that I would give. So, what would I mean, to me, I'm kind of in the ballpark of whenever you can avoid having to put a big hole in your ceiling and trying to install a backer box and all of that, I mean, I know he said he's fine with doing it, but in your situation where I think Prime Elevations are going to end up so physically close to where in-ceilings would go anyway, to me, they're so much easier to mount that I would lean that direction just for that reason.
Go either way. Let us know what you decide to do. Alex, Funness, by the way, I couldn't hear a single thing.
I know. I saw the connection got real bad.
It was all garbled.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was completely garbled. So I gathered that you disagreed with me in some way.
No,
so
I was
that's
just
what I
saying
gathered from it.
In Joe's specific room, because it's so small. That's
fine. I mean, Overall, I think that in ceilings would be the way to go.
I agree. In a general sense, I agree.
Yeah. Alex found us on YouTube. Really? While researching for his first home theater. At the moment, he just has a TV and its built-in speakers are so bad that he plugged in a pair of Logitech PC speakers, so he figures just about anything will be a big upgrade. I bet I could find something that wouldn't be. I've heard a couple of SoundBars
some that are real bad.
That are real bad. That you would look at those Logitechs and go, dang, boss, you're killing it over there. So he doesn't mind spending good money up front on gear that will last a long time. He doesn't mind putting the system together in pieces at a time to spread out the cost. Alex and his wife live in a townhouse, so he's aware that the room is not optimal, but it's what he's got to work with. If you walk in the front door, there are stairs immediately in front of you going up, which is like every townhouse I've ever seen ever, which is awesome. No doors to close the first floor off from the second floor. To your right is the living room, roughly 23 by 15.5 by 8 feet high. There's a fireplace on the same side as the front door. So behind you as you walk in, kind of. And the windows on either side of the fireplace. On the opposite end of the room, there's an opening to the kitchen and dining room, plus a door to the side into a washroom. So let me look at this again. So you walk in. Mm-hmm. I don't think I totally described this correctly, but is that the front door?
Yeah, so front door is the bottom left of I flipped the diagram around so that it's a little easier to see. Bottom left, there's your front door. You walk in, stairs are right in front of you, as most townhouses. You turn to your right.
You go to, turn your right, and then as you walk into this bigger space, to your right, which would be back towards the front of the house, is the fireplace with windows, and to your left is a bunch of kitchen and
That's right.
Whatever. So for the moment, if you came in the front door and turned 90 degrees to your right, the TV would be against the wall straight ahead of you. The fireplace and windows would be on the right-hand side, and their L-shaped couch is facing the TV. So first, over to business. How would we orient this room for a 5.1 surround sound setup? He wants to be able to wall mount the TV, so we'd like to finalize the layout. If he has this entire living room space to work with, how do we think things should be laid out? This is fine. I mean, this looks okay to me. I mean, you can't. I'm not going to say above your fireplace because I don't like that for all sorts of reasons. Yeah. I mean, you're looking up too high. It gets a little distracting. I don't love I've never loved the idea of having a heat source directly below your a big bunch of electronics. I think this is fine the way that you have it. I don't think I would orient it because obviously you can't go to the left. So in front of him, which would be like if you're facing the house, it would be the right wall of the house. The fireplace would be directly in front of you if you're facing the house. But I don't think that I would. The other side is all kitchen and stuff. So that's not an option. So. This is fine. I think I don't like corner placements here either. I think this is just okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean,
to me, the only real alternative would be if you go up to where the opening into the kitchen and dining room is. It's not like that's a huge opening, at least not in the diagram. And you do have a section along what is sort of like the 15.5 foot width of the room. Like that's sort of a flat wall there. If you put so basically I'd have your TV next to the entrance of your kitchen dining room. That would mean the fireplace is directly opposite on the far end of the room and the windows are back there. Now that's a little bit questionable to me because now basically all of the light that's coming in through the windows, and if the fireplace is on, you might see that as a reflection in your TV. If your TV is literally on the other end of the room there, that might be a reflection case. But what I'm thinking there is if you put the TV there next to the kitchen entrance, it actually gives you a place on the left-hand side and the right-hand side where your surround speakers could go. Right now, with the current setup, I'm not sure where the left surround speaker goes unless it's on a stand or behind you. Either, which is fine. But if you can't do a stand sort of in the middle of the room,
or in the ceiling,
or you really don't want to do
or behind you.
Yeah. So that, to me, it's either keep things in the orientation that they already are, or possibly have the television on the wall that's on the opposite side of the kitchen dining room. It's tough for me to say that it really should strongly be one or the other. And I don't really know what the rest of this living room looks like. Just seeing a diagram.
I wonder when people listen to this podcast if they're going to hear me answer your questions like or respond to what you're saying like totally delayed or like
So far it's
whatever,
been fine.
because
I know our internet connection is being very bad right now. I'm sorry.
I am hardwired. I'm being good, and most of my family should be asleep. It's very late. So yeah, I don't know what he said about what he said. So I think I'm right. All right. So he lives 20 minutes away from Ascend Acoustics, and he has decided he will go with them for speakers since he will be buying in pieces at a time. Do we agree with the order? Receiver plus front, left, and right to start. Then get a sub, then get a center, and then get surrounds. Then get a second subwoofer, and then maybe consider Atmos after that. I do not agree with this. This is not the order I would go in. I would go front, left, and right. That's great. Mm-hmm. I would either go subwoofer or surrounds. Okay. Then whatever I went with, I would then go get the other one.
Sure.
Then I would decide whether or not a center was something I even loved an idea of. But I would probably then go second subwoofer and then center. Center could be last.
Okay.
Center could come. Center is, to me, center is a Father's Day gift that comes at some point. Somebody you can tell your wife, you're like, listen, when I've been super good and I've done the grass or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, you're the best husband ever. I'm going to buy you a center channel. That's when you get a center channel. Everything else can happen before that center channel. Now, there's just like a whole bunch of people are slamming their heads against the wall right now. Tom is an idiot. I'm not. You're wrong. I'm right. Let's just start there. But the center channel is the only speaker that can automatically be compensated by your receiver. If it's not there, no other speaker can have that happen. If you feel like after you get your front, left, and right speaker that the center image is not very good, well, then go with the center channel right away. But if you're finding that it's not that, voices are coming from the TV, looks just like it's coming from the TV, then I would say you can hold off on that center channel just as long as you want. And literally, but then I would get Atmos absolutely dead last.
Yes.
Yes, yep. Atmos dead last is good.
I think I pretty much agree with all of that. I will say in your case, since you have this very open, it's literally open up to the second floor, so it's an open space, irregular shape, that the dual subwoofer thing is going to be very, very difficult to predict in your space. Yes. We're not going to know exactly where the two best places are to put them, and you'll have to do some quite a bit of trial and error to actually get that.
I like putting the sub just to the right of the fireplace next to the L-shaped couch, so that it's physically close to you, so that as much of the energy that can shake your couch and shake you is passing through you as it's going off into
upstairs, over to the kitchen,
upstairs and every place else.
Maybe you left the bathroom door open. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also agree that a second subwoofer is probably not something I would really worry about in this space right away, or maybe at all, because of how unpredictable. I would probably, because I know you said something about surrounds, I would probably put the surrounds behind you.
Okay.
I think is the way to go.
Yeah, so like keep the current orientation, and then because he's got corner space to his behind right, and then he's got a short wall section in between his opening and the door to the washroom. Yeah. There's a sectional wall there where the surround left speaker could go. They'll be behind you, a little bit farther behind you than what the Dolby guidelines would recommend, but it's okay. And if you like the suggestion that I came up with of the TV beside the kitchen opening, then your left and right surround speakers can, again, use that little wall section on the left and then the big flat wall section on the right. So either way, there is a place to put your surrounds.
All right. He would like to start... I'm sorry. I have read this in my head a couple of times. I keep saying start. He would like to use his starting front and left-right speakers for both home theater and music listening. Well, there's music in home theater, right? Because you're going to be listening
it's
to
just
music
he's not going to have a subwoofer immediately, so this is on his mind.
So he'll be going with the Sierra Raw speakers, but which model? He can't help but be drawn to the towers. He loves the looks, and his wife has given the okay, and Ascend does say that the best speakers they have to offer, but obviously they cost the most. And then there's the eventual center speaker to consider. the theoretical eventuals that are speaker. If you listen to me, the Sierra Horizon is just too big. He'd love to have it, but realistically, it just isn't going to fit. So assuming he will end up with a smaller sensor, probably the Sierra Luna Duo, does he start with smaller front, left, right speakers right away, or does he spring for the towers mainly because he loves their looks? Why I would get towers over bookshelves in this situation is because when I was listening to music, I was in the kitchen and I still wanted to be able to hear it
at very loud volume.
Yeah, that is literally the only reason I would get tower speakers. You are sitting so dang close to these things. I mean, it's not, you're not on top of them. It's not a bedroom.
No.
But you are sitting very close. It looks
he's going to be like in about the 8-foot range, something about there.
You absolutely have no need for towers. Now, you love the looks. I get that. I'm going to tell you, as somebody who loves to look at towers himself and lived with towers for years and years, best thing I ever did was switch back to a bookshelf in a smaller room. The best thing I ever did. So I'm going to ask you this. Do you want your speakers to look great? Or do you want to have a flexible speaker that you're going to have an easier time placing and getting the best performance out of?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, I think the answer is very clear, but you may still say, I really do like the towers, though. So,
now, I would say to you, taking everything into account. Now, we referenced at the top, somebody was talking about the review I did long ago when I got my Sierra 2 speakers and I got my like custom-made Horizon RAL speaker because I had the cabinets altered to fit the exact dimensions I needed. When I did my review all the way back then, I remarked on how the Sierra 2, which uses different drivers than are in the Horizon Center or in the Sierra Towers. They are different drivers, same companies making the drivers, but different models. That the timbre match between the Sierra 2 bookshelf speakers and the, in my case, Horizon RAL speakers, that it is the least distinguishable timbre difference that I've ever heard from speakers that aren't using identical drivers. It was remarkable to me. So, in my opinion, the supposed downgrade of not getting the largest, most expensive speakers that Ascend has to offer it's nothing. It is nothing to worry about. It is like the most confident I've ever been in recommending a bookshelf speaker to someone. Given that if you do get a center, it's going to be the physically smaller one, I see no reason for you to go with the I mean, if you really, really just want the form factor, they are tremendously good speakers. But I agree with Tom that it is easier to position, it's easier to manage, it costs less, and given your distance, you don't even need the EX. You don't need the Sierra 2 EX. The regular Sierra 2 are the speakers I would suggest to you for your front, left, right.
There you go. So what sub is he going to get once he has another $1,000 or so saved up? Ascend sells Rhythmic, and the FVX15 seems like it might be a good option. Being so close to Ascend's warehouse, it's very convenient to be able to pick up any purchases in person and avoid any shipping costs. But of course, SVS includes shipping, so that's not really a factor. So what do we say? I mean, you can't really go wrong for $1,000 out of SVS versus $1,000 out of Rhythmic. I mean, I'm going to point you towards a cylinder, honestly. The PC 2000, Pro in that corner right next to the right of that fireplace, right there.
Yeah.
Or maybe in the corner behind you if you really can't have it in the middle of that wall.
He does have windows on either side of his fireplace, so depending on heights and all that, it's possible a cylinder would end up standing in front of a window, so maybe that isn't going to be what happens there. So let's see. I mean, yeah, you can't really go wrong. I will tell you, if you're considering the FVX15, please build yourself a cardboard model.
Build a box. Hey, you know what I did this week? I had lived my advice. Okay? We are looking at getting people put on the artwork or whatever on the side of their house, right? And when we bought this house, or before we bought it, when we saw it, around here they put this sun thing. It's like the weird looking terracotta sun with the sun beams coming off of it are all in, wire or whatever. I don't know. It's stupid. I hate it. But anyways, the guy, when he sold the house, he took that with him. So now I've got the space between two windows with a hook in it and nothing there. So my wife and I have been looking at art to put up there, and we kind of eyeballed it, went, we think it should be about this size. I was like, we're building a box. I mean, not box. We're building a cardboard frame, and we're going to hold it up, and we're going to step back, and we're going to look at it and say, is it too big or is it not big enough? And we ended up agreeing that it was, it was on the big side, but it wasn't too big.
Okay.
But if we went down a little bit, we had that option. If you're buying a subwoofer and it has a port in it, it is a requirement that you build the box. Okay? It's a requirement that you build it. If it doesn't have a port in it, okay, maybe. Yeah,
you can reasonably deal with okay, this is a 14-inch cube. You can reasonably sort of picture, and it's not going to ever be so large.
You start talking 22 inches deep, 19 inches tall, 16 and a half inches across. You're like,
the FVX 15 is bigger than that, Tom.
I think that's pretty close to the dimensions of my EP500 back when I had it. So, and that I held up the tape measure and I showed my wife, and she's like, "Oh, that doesn't look so bad." They got here, she went, "Oh,
yeah." No, and
that's real big.
The 15 in the FVX 15 is a 15-inch diameter driver, and that's just the driver. There's more space around that thing, and it's a big honking ported box. So look, performance-wise, I got no beef with that choice. And if you're buying everything from Ascend anyway, Rhythmic makes excellent subs, so I've got no problem on that aspect. But please be very aware of the physical size. That could definitely be a factor. It is holding up a tape measure does not give you the full impression of what it really means to have a box that large. So look, you can't go wrong. If you spend $1,000 at either Rhythmic, through Ascend or at SVS, you're going to have a tremendously good sub. I'm not really worried about either case. If you want the absolute most output you can get for under $1,000, it is actually going to be over at HSU. So I'll mention that because the VTF 15H is even more powerful than Rhythmic's FVX 15. But again, it's a 15-inch driver with some, I personally don't like the look of the triangular shaped ports because I think they look a little strange. But if you're talking about sheer bang for your buck, that is still the champ over there at HSU. I think it's probably too big for your living room in a townhouse.
Townhouses are usually connected to other people's houses, aren't they?
Yes, they typically are. I really like the idea of a cylinder. If you can make a cylinder work, I think that's the form factor to go with here.
Lastly, he asks, would Lunas be total overkill as surrounds? Would they be worth it to have the RAL ribbon tweeters all around, or would HTM 200 SEs be the wiser choice since the surround channels aren't as important as the front three? Well, you're talking to a person who's got RAL ribbons all the way around his head anyway.
11 RAL ribbons. Totally unnecessary overhead.
Clearly, he is not the right person to be asking this question. The right person is me, and I say the HTMs are just going to be fine. They're going to be just fine.
I would agree they will be just fine. I don't think you're going to get that. I think you're going to get Lunas. I mean, this he's not even purchasing it right away. This is down the road at some point. I think one of your future orders will be a Luna Duo center and a pair of Lunas for your surrounds. I believe in my heart of hearts that is what you will end up purchasing. I will say I can make an argument for myself, for my surround speakers, for my 5, traditional 5 speakers to all be matching speakers. I can make an argument for that. The surround backs, the front heights. Why do I have RAL ribbons in my front heights? I can't justify it one little bit, other than the fact that I already own them, so heck, I'm going to use them. But if you do end up going Atmos, you don't need RALs there, but I'll say get it for the surrounds.
We're already at 2 hours, and we've only gone through 12 questions. This is not great. This is not great.
There were 23 on the list, and I didn't even finish all 23, so that's a whole podcast.
I mean, I really feel like we're going to have to just do one more and then stop because I do have to get up at it.
I know. It's a long question of Karl's here, but if we get through that, that's pretty good. We put a dent.
Yeah. Karl, you're last on the list here today.
Gotcha.
So Karl has Ascend CMT 340 SE speakers plus their matching pedestal stands. Ascend notes that the pedestals can be filled with sand or kitty litter if you want to. Is that mostly about making them harder to tip over? Is there actually a sonic benefit? The first one.
I would agree it's mostly about that, but they are hollow. I mean, they give you some damping pads so that you don't actually have a completely undamped physical connection. That's most of your sonic benefit is just from the squishy little pads in between the pedestal and the speakers. But there can theoretically be some sonic benefit to having the an inert stand on which the thing is placed. So don't fill it all the way to the top. That doesn't really help you. Fill it about half or a little over halfway. Yeah, that's my answer.
All right. Dolby seems to have adjusted their speaker placement guidelines and diagrams a few times over the past couple of years. Not if you ask them. If you ask them, they'll tell you it's been the same this entire time, even though it is so clearly not true. They used to indicate that surround speakers should go between 90 and 110 degrees in all of their setups, and that is still the case for configurations with 7 or more floor-level speakers. But for 5-speaker setups, they now indicate that surround speakers should go between 110 and 120 degrees, so slightly behind the seats, not directly to either side. Due to the layout of Karl's room, he can only put one of his surrounds at 90 degrees directly to one side. 110 to 120 degrees would be right in the doorway, but if he adds surround backs, it seems like he'd be within Dolby's current guidelines with that surround speaker at 90 degrees. He's got a Denon X4400H. It could be expanded to 7.1.4, and he has an older Denon 1612 on hand that he could use as an external amp. So what do we think? Should he add an extra pair of surround back speakers so that his surround speaker at 90 degrees falls within Dolby's current guidelines? No. I can't say it strongly enough. My answer is emphatically and unconditionally no. You're talking about like 10 degrees? Who cares? Dolby's not the boss. Dolby's not the boss of you.
Well, also,
they're not the boss of you. And plus, sonically, I bet the difference is about 0.
Also, literally nothing in his setup has changed.
Right.
Just he used to be within Dolby guideline specs. Because they used to say
and now he's not.
90 to 110. That changed, but nothing you have changed. So if things have sounded completely acceptable and good to you this entire time, them changing what they put on their diagram doesn't change everything you've been hearing up to this point. So if you're good with what you've got, you can leave it alone.
Yeah. No, there's just no reason to do this. I mean, there's no reason to do this. But let's continue talking about it. If he decides to use his Denon 1612 as an external amp, he can just plug a pair of his X4400H preamps into any stereo input, like the CD input, right? The 1612 doesn't have 7.1 analog inputs, but those aren't necessary if you just want to power one extra pair of speakers. Is that correct? That is correct. You could just put it into the left and right of whatever you want, and then put it into pure direct mode on that input, and put the volume up to 0 and trim levels at 0 as well.
That's right. Yep. And you're absolutely you can do that. There's no reason not to do that. Yep. Pre-outs from your 4400H, any stereo analog input that you like on your 1612.
So how would he handle the remote control situation? He wouldn't want the 1612 responding to any commands from his X4400H, but they're both Denon, so does he put electrical tape over the 1612's IR sensor? Is there a more elegant solution, or should he get a 2-channel Dayton amp? Boy, man's wanting to spend some money. Do the Marantz and Denon cross over with their... I didn't think that they did. I thought they had unique...
But they're both Denon in his case, so...
Oh, I thought he had a Marantz for one of them. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And actually, the Denons and the Marantz do use the same remote codes, so even that would be the same case. Yeah, and I understand what he says, because if you're just pointing the remote at it and you're changing inputs, let's say, well, then both are going to respond to that. You don't want that to be the case. Yeah.
I mean, the electrical tape should work as long as you find the sensor and are really good about it. He doesn't have like a universal remote.
Not that he indicated.
Yeah. Because if you had like a Harmony with a hub, you could use one of the individual blasters to make sure that it was only going to the Denon that you wanted to control.
Yeah, they call it their precision IR extenders, which it's a separate purchase. You have to add it as an accessory, as the precision IR.
The question I have for you is: are you wanting that second Denon to turn on and off along with your first?
That
Denon?
is the real question.
Because if you are, then you're going to be running into some real issues here.
Well, you're going to have to physically walk up to the 1612 and power it on and off. Yeah, I can't really say there's a... So the elegant solution would be if you have a Harmony remote and then you get the precision IR little accessory for that. That would be the elegant solution. The practically free solution is some electrical tape over the IR sensor of the 1612. And if you want to turn it on and off, you physically walk up to it, press the button. You could just leave it on and running idle. It's not going to use that much electricity, but
no, it's not. No, it's not.
Idle.
Not if it's not drawing in. I mean, idle would be fine. And it's in pure direct. If you do like super pure direct, whatever that is, it turns off the front display.
That's right. And all the video processing possible.
All the video processing is off, so it's as low power as it
And we are
gets.
definitely not going to tell you to go and spend any extra money on a separate Dayton amp. That is completely unnecessary. You can certainly...
for the side for the speakers we told you not to buy to begin with. But if you want to do this just so that you can you power your front speakers just because you want to have a second amp going for whatever reason, you can do it, but you do have to physically turn it on and off. So he's got the Ascend CMT340 SE up front and the pair of ELAC Debut 2.0 on-wall speakers as his surrounds. What are some inexpensive speakers that could blend well if he decides to add surround backs? Unlike his side surrounds, they don't have to be thin from front to back. None, I think, would be my answer. None speakers. They're sold at none price and some Amazon.no. Is no an actual thing? I don't want him to actually.
I think it is. I think that's like Norway or something is a .no.
Oh no! Don't buy them from Norway. That's super expensive from them.
Let's see here. So there's the HTM 200 SEs from Ascend, but I don't think that's as cheap as he's aiming for. That's like $300 for a pair of them, which is not astronomical as far as speakers go, but that's more, I believe, than the on-wall ELACs that he has. So I think he was looking for less expensive than that. The one I would actually point you to is Wavecrest Audio. Is it HVL or HL? It's HVL1, the Wavecrest Audio HVL1. What's going on there is that's actually a speaker that David Fabricant from Ascend Acoustics designed, and then it kind of spun off, and that's literally the only speaker that Wavecrest Audio sells. So that's where I would point you, because they're inexpensive and they sound really close to Ascend speakers, and they're a nice little front ported design. All
right. So he's considering getting some in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. What would we recommend? He's read Dolby's guidelines. Boy, I know. We are aware that you and Dolby's guidelines are intimately familiar. And they say that if the speakers have wide dispersion, they say 45 degrees in all directions from 100 hertz up to 10 kilohertz, meaning that they literally don't put anything in them above 10 kilohertz, but whatever. Then mount them facing straight down. But if the speakers have narrow dispersion, they should be angled toward the seats. How do you know if speakers have this wide dispersion? If they are meant to be in a ceiling, they pretty much have the wide dispersion.
With that very typical coaxial in-ceiling speaker design.
The time you know that they don't is because the speaker is angled. You know what I mean? They tell you because the speaker design will tell you. But in-ceiling speaker, it's like saying, how do you know a boat speaker is actually waterproof? Does it say it's for a boat? Then it's waterproof.
Well,
I mean, it's where
there's like the
but you're
there's
right.
like the Golden Ear or the Martin Logan that have the folded ribbon tweeter.
Right. That's exactly what I was. Basically, if it has a design that demands that you be able to aim the tweeter or rotate the whole speaker towards you, that tells you it's not going to have the 45 degrees. But almost all of them do. And
so that part answered. The ones I'd point you to, I'd point you to some Monoprice. Because I'm assuming he doesn't want to spend more on his ceiling speakers than what he's asking to spend on his surround backs, that type of thing. That wouldn't logically make sense to me. Now, I do like Monoprice's Sycamore speakers, in-ceiling speakers, just as speaker performers. I think they're a darn good value. They actually have them on sale for just $75 a pair right now, so it's pretty hard to complain about the price. But they've never added any backer boxes that actually fit properly. Monoprice does have some backer boxes, but they never made any that actually physically properly fit the Sycamore series. So for that reason, if you're willing to spend a little bit more on the speakers themselves, and I'm talking $113 for a pair now, so it's still not crazy. Monoprice's Alpha series, they only have backer boxes for the 8-inch diameter ones for some reason. I don't know why. Monoprice is a little bit weird that way, but for me, I can't really ever recommend in-ceiling speakers without backer boxes. So Monoprice's Alpha series, they have backer boxes for the 8-inch size. The backer boxes are $72 a pair, though, so you're getting kind of close to $200 a pair. for these speakers.
Right.
But that's still pretty. I mean, all other in-ceiling speakers are going to cost you more than that, so it's pretty reasonable to me. I'd go monoprice.
All right, looks like Damien has a short question or two, so let's just do him real quick and then
Cool.
we'll be done. Damien. Damien probably left after he heard that.
He'll come back. He's a constant listener of ours. He'll find it.
Damien, last week we made some recommendations for acoustic ceiling tiles from acoustical solutions, including their Alpha Sorb 1-inch or 2-inch.
That's the name, Alpha Sorb. I didn't make it up, man. I can't help it. If you're looking for it, that's what it's called. So you're gonna have to search.
Stop letting fathers name stuff, okay? Stop it. My brother-in-law, I love him. The man is a walking dad joke. Like he cannot pass a pun up. He never made a pun he didn't like. It is brutal being in the same room with this man. And my son, all of my sons, but my oldest son thinks he is the funniest man that has ever walked the earth. It is, just so hard.
You must like The Good Place.
But yeah,
The Good Place is rife with puns.
It is. Alpha Sorb 1-inch and 2-inch thick tiles with Guilford of Maine fabric that go for $25 to $40 per tile, and their signature sound barrier tiles that have a mass-loaded vinyl and aluminum backing to actually block sound transmission as well as absorb, with those starting at $40 per tile. This is for acoustic ceiling tiles that go in the drop tile
Correct.
ceiling that we were talking about. Okay. These prices are a lot more than Damien wants to pay, but now that he's had experience making his own DIY absorption panel, could he make his own ceiling tiles? With Owens Corning 703 insulation with fabric on the front and optionally mass-loaded vinyl on the back, basically be the same thing in DIY form. In terms of cost and materials, it would certainly be a lot less. I would not mass-load anything on the back of it of raw insulation. You are asking for traumatic head injury as it comes falling through your ceiling.
I mean, the Owens Corning 703 is the semi-rigid fiberglass. It
is not that rigid. It is not that rigid. It is not that rigid. No, sir. It is semi-rigid. It is, and the jokes write themselves. And all of you who are thinking them, you're my people. The way that they get these things to work is they treat the outsides of them, so that they harden them, but without damaging the acoustical properties. And if you've ever felt a panel that's been like this, it feels like a piece of like soft wood, almost like wood that you feel like you could put your thumb through if you really tried, but you don't. But you can still handle it pretty roughly. So there's a treatment. I don't know how they do it, but there's a treatment they do to make this happen. And you could just put raw insulation up there. In my opinion, it would sag over time. It might take a while to happen. If you stretch the fabric nice and tight, onto a frame, and the fabric would hold it in place pretty well, I would think. But then you're building a frame that perfectly goes into the spot of this the ceiling tile, and you're looking at rattles going on with that, especially if it's wood, which is probably what you're thinking of. But if you're thinking of just cutting the insulation to shape and then putting it up there, I mean, you can get
it's typically either spray on or roll on the stuff that is used to stiffen fiberglass board. You can purchase that. It's sort of a liquid thing that you either spray on or roll on, and it just hardens, solidifies all the edges of fiberglass stuff. So you could go with that. You'd probably waste at least a few squares with some trial and error of doing this.
For sure.
But I'm assuming he's okay with that. Then it's going to be a lot. Think of how many tiles you got in your ceiling. That's a lot to make. That is not insignificant, the amount of labor that's going into this. But hey, maybe he's got time on his hands, and yes, the material costs will be lower. Do I think this can be done? Well, yeah. I mean, Acoustical Solution makes them. It can be done there, and if you get that hardening liquid stuff, whatever it is exactly. I'm not even really sure what it is, but perhaps we can look that up.
Google's your friend on
this
one.
Exactly. This could be done. I sort of agree. I probably wouldn't try to make the panels that have individual mass-loaded vinyl on the back of them. And then the reason why the ones that Acoustical Solution sells have the aluminum backing, that's a heat and fire safety thing, because any of these tiles might have a recessed light going into them or something like that. There could be heat register plenum right beside a plenum, that type of thing. So that aluminized backing is to make sure that you're within fire codes, and I'm not sure what you'd be doing on that front. So having the backing on it to me is probably not something I'd want to tackle DIY. If you wanted to have a sound isolating barrier, I would kind of just do the roll out mass loaded vinyl that covers the whole metal section in behind there, and that's the way I would kind of cut it. You sort of cut slits in it for all the supports, and I wouldn't have it attached to the tiles themselves. So yeah, with all of those caveats, I do think this could be done. I think it's a lot of labor. I think you'll waste some at the beginning trying to figure out how it's made, but after all that, then yeah.
If you've got the time on your hands and this is something you really want to do and you find it to be a benefit, well then, like for me, after about an hour of this in the Florida heat outside of my garage trying to do this, I'd be like, I am not doing this. This is miserable.
How Acoustical Solutions manages to sell these things at this price.
Yeah. Lastly, he asked, how would you handle can lights with ceiling tiles this thick? I would buy the professional ones. That's what I would do. I mean, the tiles that were for the can lights, I would not try to make the outside of around the can lights be insulation. This is just one tile up there. It's literally one tile. It's not, to me, it's not worth it. But I'm sure Rob's got some solution that's
it's more a matter of
spray on something.
No, it's more a matter of like if you go into there's a number of office buildings and industrial settings where they are using acoustic ceiling tiles that are 1 or 2 inches thick. That's a fairly standard thing. And there are can light enclosures that are meant to work with that type of drop ceiling tile. So to me, the real answer is you get the correct type of backer for the can light that is meant to work with that thickness of ceiling tile. I mean, they exist because the ceiling tiles this thick are not uncommon at all. They're used all over the place in industrial settings. So to me, that's the solution because, I mean, the cans for those types of lights are typically a little bit bigger than you might be thinking of for your normal recessed residential can lights, and then they are adjustable in the depth that they come down, and they come with metal bars that go across so that those attach to the actual metal T-bar up there. That's what's supporting all the weight. And then you can adjust how far the can comes down to come through the thick ceiling tiles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's an almost
I know.
Night. So who do we have left?
We have Nathan W, Dean T, Brian L, scrolling past a couple pictures, Robert G, Mark N, Kevin T, Ben F, and Gurinder and Martin A. Those are all the names I had on the list, and there were some questions that came in after those.
All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank Matthew and Kevin for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and our 120 patrons over on patreon.com, including Max, Michael, Kevin, Mark, and Stan. Thank you, gentlemen.
Indeed. Matthew and Kevin, thank you so much for the PayPal donations. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anybody who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. So many thank yous to our 120 patrons, including Max, Michael, Kevin, Mark, and Stan for being amongst them.
We also want to thank Stan for talking us up to Ascend Acoustics, Joseph for talking us up to Accessories for Less, and Karl, Kevin, there's 2 Kevins, Sean, and Ben for thanking us for not stopping the podcast during the COVID outbreak.
That's right. Stan, thank you for talking us up to Ascend. Joseph, thanks you for talking us up to Accessories for Less. Karl, Kevin, the other Kevin, Sean, and Ben, we really appreciate those notes of gratitude. And thank you to everyone for continuing to listen.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Mandry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.